Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Geneva. Welcome to the second edition of the Maritime Transport Efficiency Conference. We're very pleased to see you for real and to be united today for the second consecutive year. Our goal is to bring people together and to reassemble ship owners, shipping companies, technology developers, finance, certification, insurances, ports, basically all the stakeholders from the shipping industry in order to create a positive dynamic around sustainability issues, encourage and promote innovation, and hopefully also help reduce operating costs. Today there will be no Zoom, no Teams, no Skype. We will talk and learn from each other. I hope you're happy with that. We will share best practice, do business, and also hopefully spend a good time all together, but with real people for real. I'm just here to give you some practical information before we get started. So just so you know, there's a cloakroom at the entrance. It's not attended, but I think we're quite safe. COVID measures, I see you've all dropped the masks. That's perfect. We're all vaccinated or we have been tested. We've been controlled at the entry, so we're all safe. There is, however, a hand gel available all over the place, so feel free to use it. About food and breaks, there will be coffee breaks in the exhibition area, and lunch break will be served also on the first floor. So there will be vegetarian options, etc. So if you have any specific requests, just let us know. And very important about the evening reception tonight, this is a tradition from our conference. It will take place on board the steamboat Savoie from our partner CGN, Compagnie Générale de Navigation. There'll be a nice dinner served on the boat and some excellent local wine. So even if it's raining, we're sheltered, the boat is beautiful, and it's very friendly and informal, so I encourage you to join us. The access to the boat is very easy. You just walk out of the hotel towards the city center, and the boat is there on your left. It's called the Savoie. Okay, it's now time to start our conference. We want this event to be dynamic and to be interactive, so feel free to ask questions if you have any at any time. Just raise your hand and somebody will bring you a microphone. We also use Slido. You can write down your questions with this app. You have a little paper on your table with a QR code. You just take a photograph of the QR code and it takes you straight to the page. There's nothing to download. It's very simple and efficient. It's now time for me to welcome Mr. Alexandre Epal, who is the General Manager of what we call in Geneva the DGDERI, Direction Générale du Développement Économique, de la Recherche et de l'Innovation. Mr. Epal joins us on behalf of the State Councillor Fabienne Fischer, who unfortunately couldn't join us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished guests and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Madame Fabienne Fischer, Geneva State Councillor in charge of Economy and Labour, I wish to address you a welcome message by the government of the State and Republic of Geneva. It is an immense pleasure to welcome you both physically here at the President Wilson Hotel in Geneva and online for the second edition of the Maritime Transport Efficiency Conference. The first edition was held in this very same hotel in the middle of the pandemic, at a time when we believed we were seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. We have since realized the tunnel was far longer than we expected, and we are still not sure about the light we are seeing. The fact that this conference was organized last year for the first time was a strong sign of the emergency to hold discussions about maritime transport efficiency. I wish to thank the organizers and sponsors of this event, By making this conference possible, they don't only convene you to hold essential discussions, bringing the latest innovations to the shipping industry. They also underline Geneva's position as a key location to advance fundamental issues, allowing all parties to express their views and to reach lasting solutions. As you know, the time left for discussions becomes shorter and shorter. The recent reports about global warming are extremely alarming. The speed at which our climate is changing and the temperature are rising is much higher than we initially expected. Everyone is now called upon to help reach the international climate change objectives that were set in Paris in 2015, private and public sectors alike. The program of this conference is a step in the right direction, and we hope to see clear examples of ways to decrease the environmental footprint of the shipping industry. We all know how important the maritime transport is for the entire economy of this planet. There is not a single country that does not depend on the capacity of ships to carry goods from one port to another, from sea to sea, not from A to B, sorry. Couldn't miss that. This is also valid for a landlocked country like Switzerland, as we import and export more than 90% of our goods and products by sea. Although the time may be short to react and make a difference, we see the shipping industry ready to adopt new ideas and invest in the shipping industry of tomorrow. We know that innovation is sometimes a slow process, and that change is not always disruptive or revolutionary. Some say that more regulation is needed. Maybe this is the case. However, we all know that the best change is voluntary. 2 weeks ago, at the 4th Geneva Maritime Forum, a ship owner said, "What is most important for me is not the well-being of my ships, but the well-being of my daughters." As I myself have 3 daughters, I can understand him. What is being discussed here today and tomorrow is no less than about how to keep this planet inhabitable for our species. The responsibility lying on your shoulders and ours is a heavy one. I trust the spirit of Geneva will once again guide you in your discussion and support your efforts in finding a way that is both acceptable for you and positive for our common future. On behalf of the State and Republic of Geneva, I wish you a fruitful and productive conference, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Epal. I will now introduce you to 2 gentlemen. First of all, Richard Watts. Where is Richard? Who will be our chairman for this conference. He will join us in a couple of minutes on stage. Richard is the director of HR Maritime, also the president of the very dynamic Propeller Club Geneva, and much more than that, he knows the industry inside out, so I think we're in very good hands for the rest of the day. And I'm going to step out of this scene in a minute. The second person I want to welcome now who can come and join me on stage is Michel Desjoyaux. I'm particularly proud to welcome Michel Desjoyaux to Geneva today. Michel is one of the greatest legends of offshore sailing of all times. Those of you who don't know the sport may remember Ellen MacArthur and her brilliant single-handed race around the world. Well, she was actually beaten by a man, and this man was Michel Desjoyaux. Michel went on to win a 2nd edition of this race, the famous Vendée Globe, which is the world's toughest race around the world, single-handed, non-stop, no assistance. And Michel has won almost every major offshore sailing event, the Route du Rhum, the English Transat, the Two-Star, the Transat Jacques Vabre, and even the Bol d'Or Mirabeau on Lake Geneva. and much more. We would spend the day naming all the races he's won. So the reason why Michel is here with us today is that he now devotes part of his time to maritime transport efficiency improvements as part of the Wizamo project, supported by Michelin. He'll tell you more about that in a minute. Michel knows the sea inside out from a different perspective than most of us. He has witnessed the evolution of its state. He knows better than any of us why it is so important to preserve it. Michel, thank you very much for being our opening keynote speaker today. And please a big applause for sailing legend Michel.
Hi everybody, it's quite a huge assessment for me to do that. Excuse my French. I will speak in English because it's the request of this guy. I will try to do my best, as usual. Thank you to Bernard and to Maxcom team to manage this event, which, as said, Mr. Epal, something very useful. Maritime transport efficiency is is a goal we need to go through. So it's nice that we see a different kind of participant here, including transport company. It's quite strange to have a lake just near us, as we will speak about salt water mainly, but why not? Everything can start from freshwater lakes and river. I think that this conference, the second edition this year, would have not been possible 20 or 30 years ago. I remember that 30 years ago, I arrived in West Indies after a transatlantic race double-ended, and on a small sport boat, after 25 days of sailing. And for sure, we kept the rubbish with us, and at the end of the Atlantic crossing, rubbish smells bad, as you can imagine. So we put the bag at the aft side of the boat, outside of the cockpit, and not in the cabin, to be able to sleep in good condition. And when we arrived in West Indies, in Saint-Barthélemy, the second boat was very close to us, so there was a fight during the last 10 hours. And we didn't have the time, and we completely forget to put the bags in the boat for having a clean boat and a nice picture for the finish, because we were a winner. People said, "Oh, this is your rubbish." Yes. "But why do you keep them with you on board?" "Because we will not throw them outside." "Oh, you should." "No, we can't. We don't have to do that. We have the right to do, but we will not do that." It was only in 92. I had the opportunity to work on maritime efficiency using wind power, which is a part of my knowledge in my life. And it was 15 years ago. And the guy who was managing this project, we were just helping him in computation or thinking. Each time he went to maritime transport company, when he came with this idea, which is already 10 or 20 new ideas you can see actually, they said, "Oh no, the oil is quite cheap now, so we will not use money for research and development for such a system." And a few years after, the oil was very expensive, and you come back to ask them, "Oh no, the oil is too expensive, so we can't have money to make research and development." Now, that's it. That's the life. Now in 2021, it's something normal to think about that, as it was already normal for us 20, 30 years ago. 3 years ago, I was invited to make a speech for a road transportation company in southwest, east of France, close to here. And I made a comparison between what they did in road transportation and what's happened in maritime transportation. And it was quite funny because this company was already make a lot of effort trying to know how to use energy from the truck on the roads, where to put solar panels, for example, on the roads. They were working on hydrogen trucks to reduce pollution, and so on. And the boss had a very good idea a few years ago. He asked all the drivers, truck drivers, to try to reduce their consumption of oil, of fuel. And he invited, a trainer, someone who will help the truck driver to improve their way of driving, not to drive safer, but to lower the consumption. And this trainer was a woman. You can imagine a woman saying to a truck driver, hey, you should do that, you should do that. And the boss of the company had a very good idea. He said to the driver, okay, this year, this first year of training, we will divide by 2 the money we economize with this. One will be for the company, and the other half part of this money, you will have it as a fee, a bonus. And it was so efficient that even if it was a woman who was training them how to do, they were very happy to do that. Not only because they economize fuel, but also because they earn a lot of money. And the best energy you can save is the one you don't use. It's the best for the planet. It's the best for your pocket. So let's go. And also, when I prepared this meeting in this company, I try to understand, because I'm a sailor and interested in mechanics and so on, but especially in sailing and racing, since I was born in a shipyard in Brittany. And I realized that at the beginning of the maritime transport, it was monoxyle canoe, just a piece of wood on rowing, and a human was pulling the boat. A few cycles after, galley were also maybe the first hybrid propulsion, because it was sailing plus rowing. And a few years after, on a few cycles after, the tall ship, clipper, and so on, were very fast, especially downwind, but they were not able to go higher than beam reach. So they had just half of the wind direction as a possibility to sail. They were not able to go close hold, or very, very bad, and definitely not face to the wind. But they were fast. And in the middle of 19th century, when vapor and then diesel arrived, you realize that the boat will not go faster than those tall ship or clipper, but they will just go 360 degrees as a course in any condition, any wind direction. And then we know all what's happened: bigger boats, faster boats, more freight to carry on, very big. We could see a very big container ship. Now we can imagine. We knew what was a super tanker. They arrived in France, in northwest of France, and some of them finished with their oil on the Brittany coast, which was something we don't like to see anymore. hopefully. And we know that with the cost, the fuel was flowing like milk and honey, and it was, okay, there is no problem. The fuel is there, we can continue to do anything, we don't care. We just have to make the commercial job and to carry all this. I'm quite loose in my notes. What is quite interesting with the tall ship and clipper is one of their main problem was the propulsion. The sails were not adapted with very bad high aspect ratio. They were not able to go to the wind angle with close wind angle. But not only what's happened up on the deck, but also under the deck. The boat were very long, so easy to be fast, but without keel, without anti-drifting plan, no dagger boards, no keel, nothing. So they were drifting a lot, and I realized that a few years ago. I was sailing with a racing boat close to a tall ship, which is Belém. Maybe you know it. You know him from France. And I was parallel to his course, but on the leeward side, and very close, maybe 30, 40 meters. And I was happy because I was parallel, so no risk. And after a few minutes, I realized that the distance between us was closer and closer and closer. And it was not because the parallel was not correct. It was just because he was drifting much more than me. So it's another way we have to think about when we will put wind propulsion on the boat, not to forget what's happened under the water too. Sorry. Now, as said Mr. Repal, we have a global warming of the planet. We can discuss of where does it come from, who is the responsible. I think that we don't care about that anymore. We just have to change our way of thinking. And I would propose that we switch off most of the light here because they are not useful. Yesterday night, I arrived in this wonderful hotel. All the lights in the room was switched on. And this night, I was not able to switch off the TV because there is no button to switch off the TV. Why? This is so simple to save money by saving energy. And we have to continue this way. And this is where we can help you. For sure, the sailors, especially the offshore sailors, have no lesson to deserve to anyone because we are definitely not sustainable. Our boats are made from petrol products, fibers, resin, and so on, used for the hull, for the sails, for the ropes, or everything. When we build a boat, you can't imagine how many kilos of rubbish we throw out after during the process of the building and after. For sure, when we sail the boat, that everybody said that, oh, that's wonderful, sailing is a very clean sport, it's very nice. And I can't say that. That's completely false. Our boats are not, they are nice when we are sailing, and we are very happy with that. But they are not efficient in terms of energy and planet effect. But the only capacity we could have as competitors is we are able to optimize a lot of parameters when we are sailing, optimize the boat, optimize the sails, optimize the keel and dagger board and foils and all that, and optimize lots of purpose around us to be efficient, to be more than efficient, because our goal is not only to be efficient, but our goal is to finish before the second boat, which is quite higher than just an efficient. To develop this, I have a quite funny story. When I made my first Vendée Globe, I said, Bernard, I was disappointed because the water came on the deck all day long, and it was most of the time in the South Ocean where the water on the air is quite cold. I didn't want to put back my wetsuit to go outside of, in the cockpit to trim the sail, to adjust the sails, because, okay, we will do that in 1 hour, it will be enough. And I said that I wanted to, for the next Vendée Globe, I will do 8 years after. I said already at the finish of my first one, okay, the next time I will be able to sail with slippers. It's a joke, but it means that I wanted to sail, to be able to adjust my sails by staying hidden, protected from the wave. And if you see all the new generation since my boat in 2008, the cockpit are completely closed, and the helmsman, even if you need to steer the boat, we spend more than 95% of the time with the automatic pilot, so we don't need to be in a nice position to steer the boat. I wanted to be able to spend the most of my time inside the boat and hidden and being able to follow the sails. And for that, we developed a small system, which is a telltale. For the one who are sailors, you know what is a telltale. It's a small piece of wool or tissue you put in the sail, and you visualize the flow on each side of the sail, and you know if you have to trim in or trim out the sail to make the right adjustment for getting the maximum of power for that. And this small system is an electronic telltales. It means that you have the physical telltales, but also the data arrive on a board, a computer, or whatever you want. And when we patent this product, I realized that it could be useful for a lot of other purpose, but only racing boats. And we develop the same, this part, in fact, for the wind turbine adjustment, because I can't imagine how a wind turbine could be optimized in terms of production, electricity production, using the wind power. As if we don't have telltales on a boat, on a sailing boat, on a sail, including for cruising, you will not be very efficient. And I had the opportunity to meet engineers who were working on a wind turbine, and I told them, oh, I have something to help you. Maybe you could put that on your long blades. It will help you to adjust your blades. No. We are not interested. We have data, we know exactly graphics, we know exactly what is the right angle for this. One of them asked me, how much can you propose as optimization? More, I don't know, maybe 2-3% of energy more. Oh no, it's not enough for us. Because for an engineer, 3 or 5%, it's not a lot. And half a year after, I met a girl who was working in a sustainable fund in France. And she was the daughter of a racer. And she knew exactly what is a telltale, what is it made for, and how it is helpful. And she told me, but how much do you think you could save with this on a wind turbine? I said, I don't know, 2-3% maybe. Okay, I take this. What I mean by this example is the right answer is not always where does it come from, because it's just a question of ratio and efficiency you could reach. For the engineers, 2-3% is not a lot. For an investment, it could be a huge amount of money. And we are speaking about the planet, but mainly about money. it means that we can also help you with things coming from sailing competition. I was a kid when maybe some of you know Weymouth Week and Brest Week, which was very interesting in terms of innovation, creativity. We discover Jacob's ladder, kites, making the boat flying as the system was so powerful. We saw the first foils, democratic foils going fast, the record. We saw Magnus cylinder turning with a pedestal. We saw a lot of things. And for sure, it's very difficult to make innovation in using wind power because there are so many things done. And we were recently in Saint-Nazaire. There was such close same meeting, and it's very interesting to see that there are lots of solutions, but nobody knows which one is the best. Everybody who is working on is sure that his one is the best, and it's what we do with Michelin, with Wizamo project, which is an inflatable wing. It's a pattern by two Swiss guys, Edouard Kessy and Laurent de Calbert-Martin. We work hard to optimize this system to be able to propose it for a bigger ship, but just a small sailing vessel. But it's one of the solutions on stage for the moment. And what I think is the situation is not to find the best solution, but the best solution for the use you will have. And maybe after those 2 weeks of conference here, you will have other ideas. And what is very interesting also in ideas, it's one idea can be very good, but if the way to improve it is not good, this idea will be forgotten. And sometimes you need to make a convergence of different knowledge, different culture to improve a solution. A friend of me worked on cellular research, and in the cell you've got a power central, which is the centrosome. On any cells in your body, you've got two centrosomes in each cell, and it's a 9 symmetric system. It's 9 small tubes. Each tube is made of 3 tubes, if you remember your science lessons. And he realized, after working on that since a very long time, it's also what's in the tail of a spermatozoid. Tick, 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 tick. It's not close to that, but... and he realized that an hydraulic pump was also with a symmetric 9 system. And he went to see the engineers in Germany, and he asked them, why did you make 9? 9, comment on dit, des pistons? And the engineer answered very simply. He said, okay, the more system, the biggest number you will have, you will increase the efficiency of the pump, but you will increase in the same ratio the complexity of building. 7 was very simple to build, but not efficient enough. 11 was, it's an odd number, obviously, otherwise it doesn't work. And the 11 number is too big, more efficient, but more difficult to build. And we decided it was 9, the top of this. To understand that sometimes the human can reimagine the nature because they didn't know what's happened in the cell. But you see that you can take elements from different culture, different knowledge to make a solution better because you understand why to do that. And my father always said, if you're able to reimagine a solution already imagined by someone else. Then you have understand how to use it, so you will optimize how to use it after. Sorry, excuse me. I hope that I quite finished. We are in the time? Yep. I quite finished. I hope that you will enjoy those 2 days of conference. I will follow them with you with pleasure. To finish with a positive note, I would propose you some proverb. The pessimistic complain about unfavorable winds. The optimistic hope that the wind will be more favorable. The pragmatic adjust their sails. So we need those one. Thank you and have a good conference.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Michael. It's wonderful listening about your personal experience, your passion and energy for increasing efficiency at sea. I think it's very, very inspiring. And also, I agree it's important to focus on big and small solutions at the same time. So I'd like to echo Bernard's comments, welcome you all here today. A lot of you know who I am, but for those of you who don't, my name is Richard Watts. I have been working in the shipping and trading industry for 20 years now, and mainly on operational level. My focus has always been on efficiency. I get very upset when I see systems which are inefficient. And so I'm also, as Bernard mentioned, the president of the Propeller Club here in Geneva. And in my spare time, what little there is of it, I'm also the president of an association here called SOS Mediterranean, the Swiss association where we operate a search and rescue vessel in the Mediterranean Sea to rescue migrants who are trying to make the horrible crossing. So this is the second edition of the Maritime Transport Conference, Efficiency Conference, and we have a lot of very, very interesting speakers here today. We're going to be hearing from a lot of people talking about different angles, and I think everybody's going to find something that's particularly relevant to themselves. At the end of the day today, we're going to have a very interesting fireside chat between MSC and Shell for them to discuss a partnership that they're involved in. And that, I think, is going to be very interesting for all of you. So this time last year, we were in the midst of the COVID crisis. 2 years ago, we were building up to the IMO 2020, and things seem to have moved on very, very, very quickly within the world of shipping. Now the focus on everybody's desk is emissions and efficiency, and how can we improve the world that we are working in. It is a vital subject. It's a subject that I'm very, very passionate about and spend a lot of time looking into and seeing what can be done in that area. As far as the conference is concerned, the idea is to have this very, very interactive. So we want you to be asking questions. We want to know what you think. We want you to ask your questions of the speakers who are up here on the stage. So please ask your questions, anything that comes to mind. And also, as Bernard mentioned, we have Slido, which is available. If you don't feel like putting your hand up, then use your phone to put the question on the application, and we'll bring up the question on the screen and have it answered by the experts. The idea is to get your questions and make sure we're talking about the matters that really matter to you. Now, as far as the timing is concerned, we're going to be quite tight because we have an awful lot of presentations. You're going to see me spending a lot of time looking at my watch throughout the whole of this conference. And so I'm going to be trying to push things along, keep the tempo very, very quick, and make sure it's a very dynamic conference. Make sure that you remain very, very interested and we get to cover everything that we need to cover. I apologize in advance to any of the speakers if I do have to rush you along, but we have to stick very, very closely to the timings themselves. If you do have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to ask me or ask any of the conference staff. Obviously, Bernard and Ina are present and have done an excellent job organizing everything, getting everything lined up. And so as our first presentation that we're going to have this morning, who better than to have Lloyd's Register come up on stage and talk to us about the issue of decarbonisation. We have Chris, who has set up the Lloyd's Register office in Geneva about a year and a half ago, and his colleague is going to be Charles Haskell, who's going to be talking to us today. Charles, if you can join me on the stage. He's going to be talking to us today about sustainable marine fuels. And so if you'll please welcome Charles to the stage, and we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Hopefully the slide's working. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Richard introduced me, I'm Charles Haskell. I'm the Programme Manager of the Maritime Decarbonisation Hub. So just to give a brief overview of the Maritime Decarbonisation Hub, this was set up a year ago, nearly to the day, and this was very much to build on the work Lloyd's Register had done alongside with UMass of looking at the energy transition, and we've been working on it since 2016. But it began to ground to not to a halt, but we put out a lot of thought leadership, papers explaining the energy transition. But it came to the point where we needed more work to be done in order to accelerate the debate and to provide more evidence and thought leadership. So the actual program itself is sponsored by the Lloyd's Register Foundation. So I run a team of 8 people, and we're there purely to provide evidence to try and bring clarity to the industry to enable sort of more positive decisions to go ahead. So moving on to the discussion of today. It's an overview of maritime sustainability for the fuels. I think the first question always to ask ourselves is, what do we mean by sustainability? So sustainability is quite wide-ranging, but there is an IMO definition, and this was updated by UNCTAD in 2019. But really, we're looking across the whole array, and I'm not going to read them all out. But I think it's important as well to consider previous energy transitions. This isn't the first energy transition shipping has to go through. Shipping has been around for thousands of years. And I think the primary focus is also to remember that shipping is there not to burn fossil fuels, but to transport cargo from A to B. And we've developed different means of doing that over the past thousands of years. But when we look at the previous energy transitions and why we've moved into those cases, it's been to adopt a more favourable fuel, whether it be safe, abundant, cheap, readily available, or more energy dense. I think the other thing, key criteria to look into, as well as the speed of those energy transitions. So when all the favourable conditions were there before, let's take coal to oil, this took over 50 years. Now we've got 30 years, or less, and none of those conditions really exist when we look at the future fuels. And hopefully today and tomorrow we'll go over a lot of those things and try and break down some of those barriers. But to move on, I think it's important to put shipping into the wider energy context. And I put this slide up, and it was interesting. A few months ago I gave a presentation to the wider industry and stakeholders alongside with Airbus. We gave 2 different presentations to chartered engineers. And they had the same slide, except the 2 on the right involved a plane and not a ship. So shipping is not alone. It's not about putting the problem upstream as well. And I think as we move forward, shipping will recognise that more and more, and the regulations will also come around that side. So it's important in an early stage to consider the whole supply chain so that we're resilient for the future. And by resilient, we're also sustainable. So when we look at the resources, where are we getting the fuel from is a key factor. And also, is that fuel readily available today? Production and conversion and system integration side, there's a lot of developments happening in this area, and it's not just about the technology on board the ship. It's about the technology elsewhere. The technology in electrolysis, direct air capture, is key to bring down the cost for shipping and therefore make it a more sustainable fuel. In terms of the ports, we've also got to consider the legislation within the ports. We're used to the IMO, we're regulated by the IMO, but when we look at the ports, they're based by landside industries. The solutions we may look at may not be so susceptible for our normal trading pattern or bunkering operations.
and we go so on into the ship as well, which is where I'll lead on to on a later slide. So what we've done is we've created a platform called the Zero Carbon Fuel Monitor, and we've broken all the fuels down for the potential new fuels, whether it be methanol, synthetic fuels, ammonia, hydrogen, and nuclear. And we're still building on this. So we're fuel agnostic, and we're trying to put this into context. But we're not just breaking it down into technology. We've broken it down into technology readiness, investment readiness, and community readiness. And it was very, from Michelle's comment earlier with the telltales, is yes, we need that investment decisions to be in there as well. Because community will drive investment, and investment will drive the technology. But likewise also, if you have the technology which is readily available, that can drive policy as well. So technology, investment, and community, and when I mean community, that's policy and social pressure, all very much interlinked with each other. So we've created this framework to really provide an independent, evidence-based overview of all the fuels out there. So if you have time after the conference, please have a look, give feedback, because it's continuously being developed, and it is there for everybody's use. So how have we done this? We've broken down each of the fuels. We followed a process. It's very clear. Technology readiness is relatively simple. We followed the ERTO scale, a recognized scale from 1 to 6. On the investment side, we followed ERTO's following 1 to 9 scaling. Investment readiness has followed 1 to 6, and the same with community readiness. And we've taken scalings from NASA, investment scalings from banks as well. And then we've verified all the fuels. But let me bring this into the context. One fuel which is discussed a lot, particularly for deep sea shipping, is ammonia. And when we break this down, we can look at the various challenges across the whole pathway. So resources from a technology perspective, actually ammonia is quite good. The technology is there. We can produce ammonia today in a green way. I'm not saying it is produced on mass scale, and the reason why, if we look at the investment, at the moment the investment is not there into ammonia from a resource. The policy is slowly increasing, and therefore we may see an uptake and therefore a larger investment. So as I say, the three are interlinked particularly closely. When we look at the policy on board the ship, again, the policy isn't currently there. So for ammonia to be viable, we need the investment case for it to be viable, and currently that is lacking. So we're not going to see much of an uptake of ammonia in shipping until the policy is there, and therefore we can get the investment and the investment into the supply chain. So when we're talking about sustainability, we've got to cover all the angles and try and look at as much as possible. So moving on, and how we're using this and how we hope that others will use it, from investors to ship owners to insurance to cargo operators, is to look at where the challenges lie and address those challenges. So what we've done at the moment is we've taken out we see that there's lack of investment, and therefore we're trying to break this down into manageable chunks. So at the moment, we're looking at the feeder container ship segment in Southeast Asia, trading between Singapore and Hong Kong, and then having a look at the different transition pathways, and therefore how can we make this sustainable from a investment perspective and also a well-to-weight perspective on carbon emissions. So this work will be released coming up towards end of October, beginning of November, and then we're hoping that this will then lead on to actual projects going ahead and actually moving from a period of talking and discussion into a decade of action. It's also important for other projects going ahead that it's about collaboration, and not just we've got to break away from the normal collaboration and the way we work. So we need collaboration across multiple stakeholders and also outside of the maritime industry as we can. The maritime industry is not the only industry trying to decarbonize. You have other sectors, aviation, road haulage, power companies as well. So it's about putting together coalitions, willing to work together, and actually trying to drive the action forward. So these are just two projects which we're involved with, one for ammonia, one for hydrogen, and this is about developing it and actually looking at the moment of what is possible, what is scalable, and starting from there. So on that, and trying to keep in time, adhering to Richard's comments, can I take any questions?
Do we have any questions at all? Well, I think you've done a very, very good job of outlining that. No questions at all? Well, in that case, I mean, I think we're doing quite well for time. We do have Slido, so we might drag you up a little bit later if there are some questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please. So thank you, Charles. Basically, very interesting to see how we have going from planning stage to reality. And I think this is a very, very important moment. And also, as you mentioned, collaboration. Collaboration is very important, and have the different stakeholders talking to each other at the same time. And so on that note, we're going to move over. We're going to be hearing now from Darr, who is joining us from MSC. And always a pleasure to hear from Bud. Very, very interested to hear what you have to say. Please welcome Bud to the stage. Thank you.
Well, good morning. It's really great to be here in person and see actual humans. I was just saying to Bernard a moment ago, I've worked with Charles quite a bit, but we've never met. The sign of the times. So I thought that I'd take a few moments this morning to talk with you about how we, as a very large ship owner, is managing the energy transition. You know, it's really important that we invest in the future and we think about what we're going to do now. That doesn't mean that we have all the answers now, but we have to move forward now, and we have to make the right choices based on the limited but best information that we have today. So I'm going to focus on that a little bit. That's me here. I'm taller in person. So our company is comprised of several divisions. I'm going to focus mostly on the cargo division today because it's the lion's share, about 95% or so of our business. And it comprises of more than 600 vessels. We're on 230 different trade routes, 500 ports that we call on, 54 terminals that we either own exclusively or own through joint ventures and operate. We carry about 23 million TEUs annually, and who knows where that number is going to end up this year in the end with the cycle that we're in. We have 520 plus offices around the world, and we're in 155 countries. And then most importantly, we have about 100,000 employees throughout the entire group. It's the people that make all this work in the end. I think we're a long ways away from having an operation or even ships that are genuinely autonomous. And I'm someone who grew up as a mariner, and I really value the people that we have both on the ships that make it all happen and the people that keep it running ashore as well. So let's talk a little bit about decarbonizing shipping overall from a ship owner's perspective. We chose a few slides, or a few images here on this slide, just to show you, they're not all created equal. And in addition to the large container ships, we have small container ships, we've got medium-sized container ships, and we've got barges, and we've got 19 modern cruise ships that we operate. We've got a couple of ro-ros, we've got a couple of bulk carriers, and we've got a couple of dozen high-speed craft that operate with small passenger loads at high speed in the Mediterranean. And then we've got 19 RoPax ferries, that number seems to be changing all the time towards the positive, that operate in the Mediterranean. So if you think about our company, it's kind of a microcosm of what the entire shipping industry is facing. There's no one single solution here that you can look at that's going to fit all of that, because it's not only the type of ship, but its actual deployment, the amount of lifespan that the ship has left in it, and then other practical factors that go into it. So for example, the size and shape of machinery space on a RoPax ship or a modern cruise ship is very different than the configuration that we have on a large container ship, which maybe can fit very easily a large two-stroke slow-speed engine in that type of ship, but that's just never going to work on a cruise ship the way that they're configured, as well as several other types of ships. So as we struggle through sorting through all the options that are out there, finding the best ones that fit our fleet, and also how we may adapt existing ships to that, we're going through what the entire industry is overall, except for maybe the tanker and offshore sector, because we don't really have those type of ships. So I want to talk for a moment about the external drivers that we're facing. And all that leads towards internal motivation. I mean, we had our own corporate ethos that was leading us this way anyway towards decarbonization, but the external forces are increasing in magnitude and volume every single day. And where the center of gravity is going for shipping right now, if you haven't noticed yourself, I'll tell you, it's definitely headed towards a net carbonization by 2050 of some form or another. That's kind of where the critical mass of the discussion is right now. We'll hear from a speaker from the International Chamber of Shipping who'll probably have something to say about the work that's being done internally there. We as a company, both our cruise division and our cargo division, have a net zero for 2050 target that we've set for ourselves. The Getting to Zero Coalition has a call to action, which was just published about 2 weeks ago. We and about 150 different organizations, many of them large ship owners, have signed up for that, and also many individual ship owners had taken their own steps prior to set that as a target. So whereas we were talking in terms of 50% actual greenhouse gas reductions by 2050, because that's the IMO level of ambition that was set by the governments back in 2018, I think that's becoming overtaken by events here pretty quickly. In the run-up to COP26 and then the IMO Marine Environment Protection Committee meeting that comes right after that has created this additional momentum. There was just a paper dropped last week by the UK, US, some other governments as well, including Norway, that are a little bit vague in what they're saying, but they're saying zero for 2050. And there was already a previous paper by one of the largest flag states, was one of the co-sponsors for that, also saying the same. So that's kind of the currency I think we all need to be trading in, because that's the reality. And it's not just what ship owners are saying, that's reflective of what society's goals are overall. I mean, the urgency in addressing climate change and mitigating the effects that we can, even for our 2 to 3% contribution as the shipping community, is like it's never been before. And it just seems to keep growing and growing exponentially, to the point where I was rather confused in London 2 weeks ago when we heard their government make a pronouncement through one of the secretaries of state that their target was absolute zero for 2050 for shipping. I was scratching my head thinking, wait a second, the target for the UK as a whole was net zero for 2050. That's pretty much been the language of the UNFCCC. So why would you pick out one of the hardest to abate sectors and single them out for an absolute solution? And as I'll mention a little bit later, we need to be careful when we say that, because be careful what you ask for if you're asking for absolute, because a truly absolute zero greenhouse gas emissions profile probably excludes even ammonia because of nitrous oxide slip and maybe some other issues in the production of it, as well as any form of alcohols, including methanol, including any form of LNG, including bio and synthetic LNG, and including liquid biofuels. So at the end of the day, if that's what you're saying, you're really saying you have hydrogen in the form of H2 as your hydrogen carrier, or nuclear. And I'm not sure we found a way to fit either of those into autonomous deep sea shipping by itself at this point. So I just think we need to be thoughtful about the language and not just assume we're all talking about the same thing when we throw these terms around as if they're commonly understood, because they're not, and I think that's really important. Lenders are showing more and more interest in this all the time. I spend a lot of time speaking to our lenders to let them know about our decarbonization plans. It wasn't normal some time ago for us to be openly talking about what we are doing strategically in this space as a company. We're doing that more and more now, in part because if we don't, the questions are coming at us anyway. But our company being family owned and privately held has historically really just kind of put our head down and done the work real hard. But that's changing. It's just not sufficient anymore in the environment that we're in. So also the regulators, which are reflective, I think, of society as a whole, are putting increasing pressure all the time. This is where we're headed. It's real. We got to find solutions. So what can you do today? You can design, operate, maybe retrofit your fleet to be as efficient as possible. We do that. One way that we've accomplished it is through our larger ships. You get an economy of scale of fuel consumption, which leads to an economy of scale of greenhouse gas emissions. And we've looked for ways to optimize that within that and then apply that to smaller ships as well. We also undertook a really aggressive retrofitting program. Well over 200 of our ships in the existing fleet, we retrofitted with new bulbous bows and special propeller fittings so that we could optimize their efficiency as well. Then also with regard to efficiency, new technologies are coming all the time we can use. And so reducing emissions, not so much on the technology side, although there was so much uncertainty that maybe it was at the time we were doing it, we at very large scale, and I'm talking really large scale, we used 850,000 metric tons of biofuel in the year 2020, up to a 47% blend. A lot of people didn't think you could go that far without operational impacts. We found it really had almost no operational impact, and we're ready. I mean, if that becomes available at scale and at a reasonable price, or we've got customers that are willing to pay that price, we'll come up with solutions for that right now. Although it is a challenge because there's a lot of competing interests that want to get that as an alternative fuel source. We've worked together collaboratively with a range of other stakeholders. The Hydrogen Council is one that's been really interesting for us because it really gets us looking outside our own bridge windows because most of the members are not in the maritime sector at all. In fact, there's only a couple of us from the maritime sector. And so you can really see what the other sectors are doing in that space. And hydrogen is really important. I mean, we're bullish on hydrogen. I think it has a role with H2 as the fuel for some ship types and some ship types that we operate. The problem is that molecule itself has some characteristics that don't lend itself really well to deep sea long haul shipping at large scale. So why is it still important for them? Because the derivatives that come off of that, such as green ammonia, e-methanol, and synthetic LNG, can be really good solutions where you have to pass through that gateway first by most of the production methods that are there that we're aware of today. Methanol Institute, we worked through them looking at that as an option as well. I think that's got some attractive qualities, particularly for retrofits, because what it takes to retrofit a ship to operate on methanol is far less substantial and fundamental than it is, say, to switch a ship to hydrogen or to ammonia or even to LNG. The Getting to Zero Coalition, we're members of that, and the Call to Action, which I mentioned. Also, the Low Carbon Global Industry Alliance, which was founded through the IMO. We actually chair that at the moment. And then the Clean Cargo Working Group and others. So one of our key things is we can't do this ourselves. And frankly, I don't think the entire maritime sector can do this ourselves. We must collaborate. And these platforms show us ways that we can do it. We've also done that on an individualized basis. I see my colleague Melissa Williams there, who will speak to you together a little bit later, but we have entered a formal strategic partnership with Shell as a major energy provider of ours already to look at these things together because we bring certain aspects to the table, they bring certain aspects to the table, and we walk out of it stronger and better, and then share that across sectors where possible. And we're not doing that work just for us. We're doing it hopefully to share it with the rest of the community as we learn things that can be useful. Then one advantage that we have is because we're so diversified, we can share what we learn in one of our divisions with the other division and vice versa, or across business units. So for example, some of the things that we're looking at with hydrogen, although maybe we find it to be a tougher fit for deep sea long haul shipping, actually could be a good solution for some terminal operations or perhaps other ship types that can refuel more frequently and don't have to have as much autonomy day to day. And then we also are trialing a range of solutions. I've listed a couple of them here, but we have a whole skating solution where you install it on the ship and it continuously works on the whole husbandry rather than just doing it at certain times when you pull into port and it's convenient. We made an announcement, actually our vendor made an announcement, and we followed up with that. It was Silverstream on an air lubrication system, which we think is state of the art. There's good data out there for that particular solution, and we've committed to more than 30 new builds for that air lubrication technology, which, in fairness to Wärtsilä, I think it was about 50 years ago they had the idea, but it really didn't market well for them at the time. There wasn't that much uptake on it. Now it's getting revisited in a couple of different forms, and this is a form that works for us, and we anticipate it's going to be really successful at reducing emissions through energy efficiency. And one thing I'd like to say about energy efficiency is it's important today, and it's been important for a while. We've been learning a lot. We've been capturing data. We've been trying to apply that. But I think what we've gained so far is only the tip of the iceberg, because as we move forward to these alternative fuels that are really going to provide a long-term solution for us, there are two major factors here that this can help with. One is the costs are going to be substantial. I don't know how much, but if you look at unused cooking oil as an example, when we were using a lot of it in 2020, the market price of that was substantially less than it is today. And if you look at it today, the market price roughly 4 to 5 times the market price of a conventional fuel. So if that's any indication of what's to come, we need to be prepared for additional expense. So if you need less of it, you can start to bridge that gap and make those more competitive sooner by energy efficiency mechanisms, and taking what we've learned before, continuing to work at it really hard and develop new things and apply it really aggressively. The other thing, and people tend to kind of overlook this, is most of these alternative fuels that we're talking about that are really going to provide the kind of in-state solution we're looking for. And I'm talking about, for example, hydrogen, which is about 4 times the volume of conventional fuels, or ammonia, which is about 40% more than LNG, and LNG, which was about 70% more than a conventional fuel. All of these things have density challenges to them. So in other words, if I'm talking particularly about a ship that needs maybe 30 or 40 days of operation in between opportunities to bunker, do I have enough space on the ship to put the fuel? Because if I take up too much space for fuel and machinery, I don't have enough space to carry cargo to make the ship economically viable, and the whole thing just doesn't work. So by improving our energy efficiency, we can actually bring more of those fuels in place sooner, and potentially with higher volumes of usage than we would have had before. So I think it's really important. Then synthetic fuels, I mentioned, I'm not going to go into a lot more detail about that. I could talk your ear off till you were bored if you'd like, so maybe we'll do that on the break if you're bored. But I don't think you are. I think it's why you're all here. We're all trying to find solutions, and there's a range of things out there. And another item beyond collaboration that I really emphasize, and we've had to emphasize this internally too, particularly because we've been operating ships really well as a company for over 50 years now, is be creative and be open-minded, be thinking about not how we did operate ships, not how we did design ships, but rather what could we do? And don't be locked into the notions of what a ship looks like or how it's been powered in the past. Think instead about what the possibilities are for the future, and that includes novel ideas, maybe like modern atomic power, which I think we're going to hear a presentation a little bit later on that. And I was reading an article this morning about fusion technology, which is progressing, and there's going to be a 70% scale project in the UK on that, and other fuel sources we haven't quite thought of yet. Don't think we know all the answers today, because we don't. And then the last of the 3 major messages that I like to emphasize is don't look for that one silver bullet, because it doesn't exist. There will not be one single fuel that solves all the needs that are out there. And those that will tell you, aha, it's just this, listen to me, look at my graphs, maybe look at my degrees on the wall. That's not a practical solution, and it's not one that's really going to work. And it has too much risk. And when I talk about risk, it's not financial risk. We're all used to dealing with that in our business decisions every single day. I'm talking about risk of getting it wrong when it comes to climate change. We can't all go charging off down a corridor, one single corridor, only maybe to find the obstacles are too great, and it turns out that's a dead-end corridor. There's just too much at stake here, and we have to keep these various options in play. So I think I mentioned most of these things already. On the technology side, because there's a technology side and a fuel availability side that ultimately have to come together to make this work. I believe the shipboard technology side is winning the race by far. I believe that the engine OEMs are working at it very hard now. They're working with us every single day, trying to find solutions of how to, if not use those fuels soon, make an engine that is adaptable to use them in the future so that we can build in as much fuel flexibility as possible and be ready when the fuel's actually there. One exception to that is I don't have the same level of confidence with fuel cells. I think fuel cells have a really important role to play. I think that I can see applications where a little bit of scaling up, they make sense right away. But in the longer term, they need to be developed at much greater scale when I'm talking about power density than what we have today. So I'm not so sure about that one because the automakers, for example, have been working at that very, very hard and have spent billions and billions of euros to try and get there. And they're still not there even for their applications yet. So that's one that I think is important and one to watch because on the technology side, the 35% or so efficiency gain that you could gain from a fuel cell could make the difference as to whether or not a very low density fuel like hydrogen is truly viable or not. So if that piece of it comes up faster, then more of these low density, longer term solutions can be used sooner. So I think that's very important to watch, but at the end of the day, the controlling path here, in my opinion, is going to be the fuels. Are the fuels available? Can you get them not only in theory and buy them on a commodity market or through a trusted partner who provides you with energy, but can you actually get them through what is today largely a non-existent midstream and then delivered to your ship where you need it, particularly when there will be competition for most of the good ideas. Most of the good ideas in energy production are not unique to our industry, although I don't hear a lot of other sectors talking about ammonia as a fuel, but the ammonia that's produced today all has uses. Agriculture uses a huge amount of it. They may still want to use that. There are other commercial uses for ammonia as well. So we're going to have to compete for it and get it successfully. It's not just a theoretical solution. We need a real solution. I'd like to real briefly repeat something that a fellow panelist said the other day on a speaking engagement I was on that I thought was simple but brilliant. He said, hey, look at my driveway. My driveway is Ferrari ready today. Doesn't mean he had a Ferrari. Didn't mean he will have a Ferrari, but it's Ferrari ready. So let's be careful about how ready we think we are until we've actually matched up the fuel to make it really happen. Otherwise, it'll just never fulfill its potential. And also, let's not be afraid to take incremental steps that are available today, such as fossil LNG, because you could step off into bio-LNG or synthetic LNG that when you look at the life cycle have great benefits towards greenhouse gas emission and continue to push forward with the gains we can get today to build the right foundation for the long-term future solutions. Just lastly, a little bit about the container shipping sector. 80%, I think that number is light, of the goods we use are transported by sea. A global market-based measure, we believe as a company, is required to close the R&D gap in developing zero-carbon solutions and also the fuel costs. You've got to be a little careful with that because today, when the solutions aren't really there, it just looks like a tax, and I don't know where that revenue goes. But when the solutions are really available, I think that can be quite effective, and we've called for carbon pricing to be utilized through a market-based measure to be one of the regulatory instruments that's in play. And then we are taking concrete actions today and continuing to look for strategic partners whose goals fit ours, whether that's on the customer side, the lending side, or the supplier side, such as our strategic partnership with Shell. We're constantly seeking that out because we need this right mix of solutions. We need a solution set to help us actually get to the long-term prize, which is decarbonization. That's not carbon intensity. Carbon intensity is a nice metric, and it helps a customer a lot when they think about what it costs to move a box in terms of carbon emissions. It doesn't get us to the actual solution itself. It needs help with other things as well. First and foremost, ambition. Second, investment. And third, application. Thank you for the chance to speak with you this morning. It's really been my pleasure. I look forward to speaking with you a little bit later.
Thank you very much, Bud. Always such a pleasure listening to you. I could actually listen to you for hours and hours. As you're saying, it would be very nice if there was one solution that fixed everything. It would be very tempting, and it would take the problem away from our desk, get someone else to fix it. Do we have any questions in the audience for Bud? Any of the different areas that he was talking about that anyone would like to go back and revisit? We have a question here in the back. Charles.
Hi, Bud. Just a quick question. In terms of container shipping, we're seeing more and more pressure on the end consumers, the IKEAs, the Home Depot. Where do you see your biggest driver for MSC to come from? Is it going to be from policy or from the end consumers to actually drive change?
So I think number one for us is, we've examined it, and we think this is an existential issue for shipping. And so as a matter of policy that keeps us to be a substantial, successful business in this space, we think it's absolutely necessary. That would be independent of regulations, in my opinion. But the regulations, I think, are driving which direction we have to go with certain things. So, for example, some of the recent developments at IMO connected with the evolving situation in Europe, I don't know exactly what all the impacts are going to be from that, but what I do know is networks are going to end up slowing down some because they're going to have to reduce power. That may not be the optimal solution because then you have to add in a whole lot of ships to maintain the same level of service. So you have to be a little careful with that. But I think the regulations are going to help shape the number of options that you have available. With or without the regulations, with or without the number one driver, which is we think this is essential to continue to be a leader in this marketplace, which we intend to be for a very long time, our customer needs have to be front and center. And the customers more and more are saying, this is important to us. We want to know what you're doing about it. And some of them, thankfully, are saying, hey, we'd actually like to partner with you to implement some of these solutions. To be perfectly blunt, at the moment, the number of customers willing to take that approach and join us in the journey, as opposed to just asking us what we're going to do about it and forcing it, is a small number. We think that will change, and we think over time, our customers, whether it's customers that are shipping containers or customers that are going on cruise ships, are going to become the people that are the younger generation today that grew up with this being a priority. A lot of us had to adapt to it over time. And I can't believe how much different the conversation is today amongst a group of ship owners. And you can imagine the demographic when you sit in a group of ship owners. It is so much different what we talk about today than it was just 2 or 3 years ago. There are no climate deniers that are willing to openly say that anymore, and we're all instead talking about how do we move forward. We have adapted, but the customer of tomorrow, that's the people who are protesting and speaking out the loudest today. They need to be heard, and they're going to be making business decisions that affect whether or not we can actually continue to maintain a social license to operate in the future.
I think that answers your question very thoroughly. Does anybody else have any questions for Bud? I think we've got a question here.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Maddie McLean, the Secretary General of the Zero Emission Ship Technology Association. Bud, yeah, quick question. I hear you talking about shipping efficiency. We're talking about different fuels, and one way to drastically reduce the fuel requirement on board shipping is wind propulsion. I mean, we've been using it for thousands of years. Are you looking at bringing that back, of using wind propulsion in any applications?
I'm glad you pressed that because I didn't want to skip this question on the Slido. So I see there's also 7 thumbs up on it. I only have 2, but there's 5 more out there somewhere. I'm a lifelong sailor, so I'd love to go back to the glory days of sail if it's feasible. And you know what? For some ship types, it may be, and for some ship types, it may be more than a supplemental source. So in answer to your question, with the cruise side of our business, we're in a developmental project right now with one of our shipyards to look at the feasibility of principal propulsion being wind for a modern luxury cruise ship, so that's one thing. We also are looking at Flettner rotors and other sorts of devices that can provide supplemental power. I will say for our ship type, I don't think the things that resemble sails are going to be very feasible just because of the obstructions that we have on the decks for cruise ships and RoPax ships and container ships. But there are wind solutions out there that I think definitely fit into the longer term mix for us. And yes, we are looking at that.
Excellent. Are there any more questions quickly before we do
Yes,
break?
here is a question.
A question here.
Yes, this is Michael Arts. Hi, Bud. Good to see you again, and always fascinating to listen to you. If you see in the container shipping, you see SEMA CGM is moving very much into LNG. You saw the announcements that Maersk did earlier this year on ammonia and methanol. MSC going in a bit of a different direction again. They seem to be moving in different directions, whereas, for example, in the cruise industry, there is a lot of momentum for LNG as a future fuel, or actually as a current fuel to decarbonize. So is that an obstacle to move the cargo industry, the container industry, to move forward at speed? And what could they learn, for example, from the cruise industry to collaborate more?
So when it comes to LNG, we have made a fairly substantial move. I mean, I think it's a big move. It's a lot of money for 11 ships that we've talked about in the public that are of large size, 15,300 TEU. These are big ships. That decision by us to go that direction for those ships and consider it for others has been largely informed by the experience we've gained in the development of 2 different LNG designs for our cruise division. So I personally, I work a lot in cruise and a lot in cargo, and I have a front and center role in our alternative fuel strategy. So there is a lot of cross-pollination in our company as to what we've learned in one to the other. LNG as a fossil-based version is not going to be a long-term solution. It gets you about a 7 to 23% CO2 equivalent life cycle sort of benefit. Others can haggle around the edges, and you can change the metrics and come up with different numbers, but you can get a gain today. Those that went into it for cost, I've said this for a long time, you're probably making a mistake if it's just focused on cost, because the commodity cost had always tracked lower than conventional oils, but that's not the case today. So you have to be in it for something different. One of the reasons that it was so attractive to the cruise business is it also solved some of the visible emissions, particulate matter. It gets you to NOx Tier 3, which helps as well, and eliminates any IMO 2020 sulfur sort of strategy for compliance. You know, that is your strategy if you move to LNG. And where cruise ships tend to operate, often are right in densely populated areas or really nice, pristine areas, and not out at the more remote ports where container ships and other types of ships normally are. But as we look at this and look at what the options are, unless you're going to sit back and say, you know, wait till fuels become available, or do a small trial with one of these alternative fuels that maybe you can develop in small quantities going forward, what choices do you really have? You know, you've got energy efficiency at scale, obviously, you know, take it as much as you want. A lot of good options out there. Biofuels, which have scale problems and cost problems, but that can get you a benefit today. And you've got LNG. We've done all 3. And if you think about our network of well over 600 ships, to say that we've got 11 on the order books that are LNG is not a huge shift for us, but it philosophically is, because that was the first for us. If you look at our competitors, many of them are using LNG now in their new build designs, or at least dual fuel capability.
Thank you very much, Bud. We have a minute or 2 left. I know we're cutting into the coffee break, but in fact, I think it's a fascinating discussion that's going on. There's a last question here on the board. The first question you just basically covered quite thoroughly. Last question here. You mentioned there would be more than one solution, and MSC appears to be exploring several fuel options. What timeline do you expect for each fuel's uptake? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but would be interested to hear your comments if you can keep them.
Yeah, I'm desperately looking for a crystal ball or a magic 8 ball, those of you that remember that. Nobody knows for sure is the short answer, but I think a transition to bio-LNG and synthetic LNG is on a faster timeline than I would have originally thought. But I think in order to get your supplies secured, you would have to start making some commitments for volumes very soon to have, say, a 5, 7, 10-year timeline to have those available at scale. But I would say that transition off of fossil LNG for those ship types is closer on the horizon than I would have thought if you'd asked me a year ago. And I think that in large part is driven by the energy providers. You know, they've got a vested interest in making sure that that's provided not just for our sector, but for others. When it comes to ammonia in particular, and when it comes to the synthetic form of LNG, when it comes to e-methanol, I think what you really need to watch there is the gateway drug of green hydrogen. Because most of those, through the production methods we expect to see, are going to have to pass through that gateway first. And right now, it takes an enormous amount of renewable energy that doesn't exist through electrolyzers, which don't yet exist, to produce the hydrogen, which does not exist, to get the green hydrogen away from the other people who want it and divert some of it towards those other fuel production methods through more renewable energy that does not exist, into those production methods which do not exist, into a midstream that does not exist. I don't say that in any way, shape, or form to discourage those as good solutions, because those are going to be good solutions. They're going to happen. But we need to be realistic about the timelines. You can't flip a switch and make this happen. So for all of those others, I'd say it's a longer timeline. Biofuels and the contribution that they can make today, it's really a question of scale and cost, not does it exist, because it does exist, and there are more and more creative products coming to the market every day. That maybe is about the best I can do with that. Oh, one more I'll add. If you're looking at the next generation of atomic power, it's probably a step a little bit downrange from those hydrogen derivatives I mentioned, just because it's going to take a while to get that to be proof of concept and beyond that and get it on a ship.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Bud. It's always a pleasure listening to you. It's always fun. There's always something you learn. If you could please all join me in thanking Bud for his excellent presentation.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. So as I said, it's always fun listening to Bud, especially speaking with so much knowledge and experience, and also speaking from the point of view of MSC, which is looking at this from such a vast scale. We're also looking forward to this afternoon. There will be a fireside chat between Bud and Melissa Williams from Shell, and they will be looking at the subject of decarbonisation. I think that will be a fascinating discussion as well. The only problem is that we're not going to have as much time as we'd like, because it's the kind of discussion you could have for hours on end. As Bud said, it's the importance of language. It's also collaboration and looking at novel solutions. And so we need to look at many different aspects of this. So that brings us to the coffee break, which we're going to be having now. After the coffee break, we're going to come back and we have a presentation from Amine Kadiri, who is joining us from Gaztransport and Technigaz. And so I think that's going to be very, very interesting. And after the coffee break, please, we'll be starting again at 11 o'clock, as sharp as we can. I know we've cut into the top of coffee break a little bit, but please humor us. And when you come back, if you could, as much as possible, come and sit here in the front, because then we have you closer to us and the speakers can see you and interact with you better. So enjoy your coffee, and we'll see you back here at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask you to slowly take your seats, we're going to get started with the second part of this morning. So I hope you've all had your coffee and raring to go. We've got a very, very busy second half of the morning. In fact, we're going to start off with a presentation from Mr. Amine Kadiri, who's joining us today from Gaztransport and Technigaz, and he's going to look at the subject of solutions for a future-proof shipping. I do very much that he has some solutions there, because I think that we very much need them, certainly with some of the uncertainty that we're looking at going forward. We're also going to be hearing then from Olivier from Aderco, talking about biofuels. We're going to hear about hydrogen, and then we're going to be hearing about the fuel options for newer building options, and then before lunch we're going to finish up with a panel discussion, how to break the chicken and egg dilemma of alternative fuels. So on that note, I'd like to pass you over to Amine. Please welcome him to the stage. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. It's working fine? Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be amongst all of you today and have the opportunity to present a GTT innovative solution for future-proof shipping. So the question that we're going to be able to answer today is how can we provide you with future-proof shipping to meet the upcoming requirements of the IMO. So for those of you who do not know GTT, so we're a French engineering company. We have more than 60 years of experience now, almost 60 years. So GTT stands for Gaztransport and Technigaz. So basically, it was two separate companies before who have merged in the 90s and now have this membrane technology, which is a cryogenic containment system for liquefied gas and in particular LNG. So as you may know, we have today more than 500 LNG carriers equipped with our technology and more or less more than 35 LNG fueled vessels that are coming more and more to the market. So first of all, I wanted to discuss this new reference that we have set up. So this is a picture of the CMA CGM Jeppesen container vessels, so 23,000 TEUs container vessels, equipped with a Mark III membrane technology with an 80,600 cubic meter tanks, performing this bunkering operation in Rotterdam in November 2020 with the gas agility, which is also equipped with our membrane technology, same tanks, same capacities. So this was actually interesting because it was the very significant milestone as we were able to load 17,000 cubics of LNG and at the same time loading 5,000 TEUs. And also, it was also the first of a kind since we were also able to load 13% of bio LNG. So actually now in Rotterdam, it took place many, many times every week. There's a bunkering operation going on. So we're very happy to be on both sides with the MOL and Total gas agility vessel and on the CMA Jeppesen, which is the flagship of these new dual fuel vessels. So what you see here is actually what's inside the tank. So it's a picture of a Mark III containment system. So this is actually a picture of an LNG carrier tank. So LNG fuel tanks are quite smaller, of course. So it's also a way to see how we were able to provide these solutions in license and partner in Korea and Chinese shipyards. So this is also one of our latest LNG fuel vessels. It's from the Ponant, which is a French cruise company, who at first were considering two Type C B2B tanks in order to reach 2,900 cubics. And so we were able to challenge this solution and to provide more than 4,500 cubics by optimizing the space and also saving one deck. So the specificity of this project is the first two-bar pressure with an alternative design. So we're also very glad to be able to provide some new solutions coming to the market. This ship was built in Vard shipyard, part of the Fincantieri group. So we're also very happy because it has performed recently a bunkering operation with Gazum lately and will now start its commercial operations. What you can see here is the tank, as there are two different tanks, two separate tanks. This is one of the the F tank that looks completed now, and you have some light to see the efficient shape that we were able to provide. It's as I mentioned, it's a two-bar gauge tank, so we had some constraint in terms of height, and actually Ponant was very satisfied with this flexibility that we were able to provide by reaching 2-bar gauge tank. And also we were able to upgrade the existing fleet with our partner Hapag-Lloyd. So this is the first of a kind retrofit project. So it was a 15 TU container vessel which was LNG ready, and we performed this exoskeleton membrane tank, which was actually outfitted in a couple of months. And when the vessel was at quayside, we were able to lift it in a day in HRDD shipyard in China, and to integrate it in a couple of weeks. So we are also working on different types of solutions to improve this retrofit business case. Also by adding a new LNG and cargo capacity, which will increase the benefit commercial-wise. So it is also something that can be of interest for ship owners looking to retrofit their fleet or part of their fleet. Going quickly here, this is our new orders in 2021. So we're delighted to have some success in the last month, especially with the renewed trust of CMA CGM, with 6 more dual fuel vessels of 15,000 TEUs, equipped with membrane tanks of 14,000 cubics of LNG, and also 13,000 TEUs, Latamax, with also 14,000 cubics LNG tanks, so built in China in the CSSC group. And also the C-SPAN vessels chartered by the Israeli ZIM, so 15,000 TEUs, 5 of them, with 12,000 cubic LNG tank. So the specificity of these tanks is that they are the first of a kind to be ammonia ready. So I'll have a few words on this in the coming slide. And we will also be able to announce some new orders when it comes to dual fuel with other ship owners. So I hope we'll be able to communicate in the next couple of weeks. But we can see clearly that there's a lot of interest for dual fuel solution now, and LNG seems to be more and more attractive to ship owners. So as for the, let's say, the economics and the requirements in terms of regulatory CO2 carbon footprint, we can see here that, as Bud mentioned earlier, LNG now is able to cut between 20 and 25% of CO2 carbon footprint, and we are, of course, looking forward to having more and more biogas coming to the market, and synthetic LNG, which will even be able to increase this CO2 carbon footprint cut. And as you can see here in the graph, is that ammonia now is very polluting because it's produced mainly by methane. So we definitely can see here that LNG is a solution that is ready right now, and its performance will be increased in the coming years. Also here, what we can see is that LNG, apart from the current spot prices right now, is a competitive marine fuel. And bio-LNG and synthetic LNG will be even more efficient price-wise compared to future biofuels. So it is something that we're definitely looking forward to, and we are hoping that it's also something that will be more and more of interest for ship owners who are looking for dual fuel solutions. So coming to ammonia, so we are very happy and delighted this year to have the approval in principle from Bureau Veritas, and we're currently working with other classes. We're able to provide now with a first-of-a-kind fuel storage flexibility with LNG, bio-LNG, synthetic LNG, and also being ammonia ready, which means that in terms of ownership, the cost of ownership, ship owners will definitely be able to have this fuel storage flexibility and to be able to retrofit if needed to ammonia with our tank, which will be with a very limited or non-existent cost of retrofit when it comes to the tank. So this is actually the solution that was chosen by CISPAN and ZIM. So as I mentioned, the ammonia readiness notation, which was approved in principle by Bureau Veritas, is basically the same tank that we have, the Mark III membrane tank. So it's just a steel grade that needs to be chosen accordingly, and reinforcement of the structure and the hull and the scantling as well. So this approval in principle was obtained in February 2021, and we're currently working with other classes to also be able to have this notation. So the first container ship order from ZIM and CISPAN with this new feature will be constructed in Samsung shipyard, SHI, starting next year, if I recall correctly. And we also got the ammonia readiness notation from the DNV, pending some couple of items. So we are still working on material compatibility tests, which we are already in progress. Several campaigns will still be ongoing until next year. Last but not least, digital. We have acquired recently several companies in smart shipping, such as Majorca, OS Engineering, and Ascens. So right now we're able to provide a GTT digital platform to ship owners who are looking to optimize the way that they're handling fuel, energy as a cargo or as a fuel. So basically we have numerous features such as LNG aging, monitoring, the rollover, the bunkering, and of course also modules coming directly with the performance of the vessel. As you can see here, it's savings of standard savings of a regular ship. So we have now numerous solutions in terms of smart shipping, and we're very proud to be able to propose these solutions to every ship owner who choose our technology. So as I mentioned, we usually accompany ship owners with a digital package, but not only a digital package. We are able to provide services to our ship owners who choose our technology. So we are there to assist them in terms of training. So for personnel onshore and offshore, we also have a bunkering simulator that we have provided to CMA, to Ponant, to Hapag-Lloyd. And we're also there in the shipyard when it comes to the construction of the tank, the commissioning, the decommissioning, the gas trials. And we're also there close to the ship owner when it comes to the first bunkering operations, and also trying to prepare as much as possible the upcoming bunkering operations that will take place with new bunkering vessels. So we're able to provide and to perform bunkering studies to see how it can be performed in the best possible way. We also have the GTT 24/7 hotline, which is the HERE system, which basically is a hotline in which you can solicitate GTT personnel in case of any pressure rise or any issue when it comes to the tank, especially, for example, in bad weather or whatever. So we are able to accompany ship owners from the design stage to the construction, to the operation, and to the maintenance. So it is also something that is very much appreciated by ship owners, and it's something of high added value for them. So this is basically more or less what I wanted to say. Today we are able to provide some future-proof shipping solutions, and we're definitely looking forward to assist more and more ship owners choosing LNG as a fuel. Thank you. Pleasure.
So very, very interesting hearing about all of the expertise that you have, and also showing us the photos. I think it helps an awful lot. We have a question immediately on Slido here. So do you have data of nitrous oxide emissions for both LNG and ammonia?
Well, it is something that we're definitely looking at. NOx emission for both LNG and ammonia, it is something that We are currently investigating as we have a dedicated task force for both ammonia and hydrogen. So we have a roadmap for the next decade for both energies. For this particular question, I'll have to get back to you with some specific data on this.
Excellent, thank you very much. Does anybody have any other questions? Well, we do have one question over here. Do we have, there you go, the microphone is coming.
Did you made any risk evaluation in terms of explosion or similar compared with the use of classic fuel? Did you made any kind of...
You mean explosion of the engine?
During refueling, during operation?
Yes.
Did you made some simulation
yes.
of risk like Monte Carlo, similar?
Yes, we have performed collision simulations in a German university, and what I can say is that our tank stretches, the insulation stretches, but never breaks. So we never experience any leaks whatsoever, and we're actually pretty comfortable in saying that our solution is 100% safe and efficient. So safety is a very important aspect, if it's not the main aspect of our technology.
Excellent, thank you very much. Just very quickly before you go, there's a last question here that's been put on Slido. Does the NH3 ready designation include information regarding the long-term effects on engines and auxiliary equipment, or just the ability to carry the fuel?
Actually, it's just the ability to carry the fuel, so no effect on the engine or the auxiliary engine. So it's just making sure that our tank, if needed, can be retrofitted in a very limited, with limited expenses or no expenses at all when it comes to make sure that the fuel is able to carry ammonia, but no effects on the engines or auxiliary equipment.
Quite possibly a very different question that would be. I think that does bring us to the end. Thank you very much for your presentation.
My pleasure.
Please join me in thanking Amine.
Thank you.
And so now, sticking closely to the tight timetable, we're going to move over and we're going to hear from Olivier, who's joining us from Aderco International, and he's going to be talking to us about the latest research on biofuels. Olivier, please join us on stage. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Olivier Baiwir. I'm CEO of Aderco Group. Today we would like to speak about biofuels, viable transitions, maybe, we hope so. Before to go deeper in my presentation, I would like just briefly to present you Aderco. For over 40 years, Aderco is formulating and designing fuel treatments, especially on the surfactant base, strong detergent. Till 2007, we use derivative petroleum product, and since now, we use vegetal-based product. We have designed a treatment, fuel treatment, which is a wide range of improvement before, during, and after combustion with one product. Our dosage is 1 liter of additive for 55 metric tons of fuel. The range of treatments cover HFO, LSFO, MGO, and now biofuels. We have 4 offices all around the world. The head office based in Lyon, Swiss, one in Belgium, another one in UK, and one in Singapore. We are 100% dedicated to industrial and marine. Our business is over 40 billion liters of fuel treated every year, and increasing every year as well. Our target is to maintain your OPEX lowest as possible, and also to maintain the efficiency of your engine on the top between the time of overhauling. Minimize your emissions is also our target by improving the combustions. Concerning the topic of the day, how viable is biofuel as transition fuel on the road towards zero carbon futures? We feel that it's possible, but maybe for a longer period than expected. Because we see also the results in the industry, and I will explain later on what we have done already with biofuel in the industry. I think at this level, it's also a geopolitical project engaging a lot of countries. Across our trips in Africa, especially on the Equator Belt, we have seen a lot of investment on future biofuel refineries. It's a fact that the transport economy must diversify. We have seen that we have ammonia, we have gas, we have biodiesel, maybe we'll still have with some LSFO as well, the electricity, maybe the nuclear. I believe that we will see that also this afternoon. But biofuel is one of the routes that we may consider. What we see also, our vision is that probably in the future, the shipping will use a lot of different type of energy or fuel according to trades and the type of ships. That's why we cannot focus on one solution, but there are several solutions on the market today. Also, we noticed that since a while, the major oil companies are investing in biofuels. And we see companies that they want to take more and more market shares. On the automotive market, industry, they are already there. Aviations, that a big major company, French major company, want to produce biokerosene soon. And of course, notice the turn of the shipping. As I said before, biofuel is used for over 10 years now in the industry, like in Indonesia, like in Brazil, or also in Australia and Canada. But there is a vast, great range of biofuel available on the market. Automotive market, we will be around 10, as you use every day on your cars for diesel or gasoline. But it's going up to B100s. And on industry, we see a lot of B100s. And I will explain and I will show you the different grades, and sometimes it's quite amazing. The main difference, what we know with the fossil fuel, the biofuel is a living fuel. And you need an appropriate storage, onshore and on ship. Because due to the nature of the biofuels, the biofuel react with the water by condensations. And the combination of both, it's a bacteria growth. And the bacteria, it's really a challenge. But there are solutions. Also, as soon you have a great or a high bacteria growth, you have a drop of the pH. Means that the fuel starts to be acidic. But it could be also acidic by its nature or by its origins. Also, the oxidation can make a problem on the long storage periods. And on the ships, the issue also is the pour point, that the point that the fuel becomes thick, because if you have vessel sailing around St. Lawrence River during the winter, it can be a challenge. The calorific value is also a challenge, because the calorific value is less than the fossil fuel. Means we can burn more bio. And I stated also on the previous presentation, the price could be an issue, but I believe that it will be a regulation on the market soon. Our adventure in the biodiesel starts in 2015 in Indonesia. A client, a mining operators, asked us, do you have solutions? We use your treatment on fossil. Do you have solution with bio? We have bacteria problems. Then in 2018, another step, that it was for the power plant in Brazil, that the power plant get also problems of bacteria. But that was a bit different. The previous contact was B20, that 20% of biofuel in the diesel. And the first one in Brazil was 100% biodiesel, with a blend of different vegetal and animal fats. And then in 2019, we got another contact for further investigations from a European producer with another type of B100. That's why that we can say that we have 6-year experience now on the biofuels, especially in the industry. What are the problems The big problems here is, as I mentioned, is the bacteria. That's why that is extremely important during storage operation on shore or on board to keep the fuel free of water. Otherwise, we have the case here, it's a B20 fuel from Indonesia that we started at 20,000 CFU. It's community formed by unit, is the level of bacteria. And then after 30 days of storage, we reach 20 millions. You should know that the limits is 4,000. That we did the same, pick up the same fuel, did the treatment. We start a bit lower at 2,000, but after 30 days of storage with the treatment, we kept 2,000, which are acceptable limit. Here, that's quite interesting. The guys at the lab make his days, because here you can see that's a fantastic cocktail that was smelling like hell, I can tell you. The guys almost died. Soya oil, bovine tallow oil, pork fat, and chicken oil. That you can see, and that burn in the engines. It's fantastic. Here the problem, it was the oxidations. It's why that they had a lot of deposit on the injection systems, and they were cleaning very often injectors and injection pumps. And then we did the test, the Rancimat, and the Rancimat is a bit different with the biodiesel. It's like the butter that you have in the fridge, and at one day that's starting to smell. But it's a little bit the same here. The difference that we heat up the fuel at 100 degrees. And we see that after 10 hours at 100 degrees, the pH drop, and really we can see the oxidations. That with our treatment, we reached 19 hours before to start, but the pH was remained much higher. A good protection also for those fuels. What is interesting, because we did the test, we checked what was the relation between the pH, the bacteria, and the water, to understand what's going on. That is the original fuel. This is the original fuel from the beginning, and we see that we have a pH at 636, which is a bit low, a bit acidic. Content of water is very low. Okay, sorry. And then we let the fuel during a month alone, and we see that at the end we reach 636. We top up 2% of water in the same fuel without any treatment. We reach at 638. Then we did the same thing plus the treatments, and then you can see after 31 days that we have a pH at 7.18. Does that mean we remain above the limit? What is interesting is the relations. Here we reach 8,000 CFU, which is above the limit. As soon you reach a bit of water, the 2% of water, that you are 80 millions, that you reach the sky. And then with the treatments, we remain at 2,000, which is absolutely acceptable. Again, what I mentioned, the fuel is a living fuel. We need to protect the fuel during the storage. Another point interesting here is that from rapeseed oil, that's from Europe. And what is interesting, we have discovered also during our studies, according the origin of the fuel, of the biofuel, you can have a lot of difference on the pour point. If you have fatty acid methyl ester coming from the great north of Europe, Canada, the pour point will be lower. We see that usually between -5, -10. If you go with a fatty acid methyl ester from Brazil or from Indonesia, does that mean palm oil or soya oil, you will get pour point between 15 and 20 degrees, which could be problematic for the ships during the winter. Same kind of tests, just to say that here, with the treatment, we can really break the oxidations, and we maintain the pH higher, which is a good protection for your tanks and in the future for the injection systems. Well, we feel in conclusion that biofuel could be one of the viable solutions or an alternative. I believe that the ships will use some bio, some gas, as I mentioned before. It's also be taken in consideration that it's an easy solution for the ship owners with a minimum of investments in regards of the huddlers. Biofuel will be maybe a contender for the VLSFO in the future. The availability will increase, that's for sure. We will see more and more availability around the world. It's a matter of time. And we feel that in general, we are not speaking for us, but in general, with a good preventive treatments, you will have no problem to use this kind of fuel. Also, for once, for many years, the heavy fuel oil operation made in the shipping was really bring a lot of information in the industry. But now what we see is a little bit the opposite. The industry can bring a lot of information to the shipping for the biofuels. Thank you very much for your time and for your attentions.
Olivier, please stay here a second. Thank you very much, Olivier. It's very, very interesting to hear, and good to see all the data backing up everything that you're saying. I think it's very, very interesting. I'm just going to see whether there are any questions in the audience. I see we've already got a question here on Slido, so we'll go to that question now. How do you see the demand evolving between FAME and HVO in the future years?
That's definitely the demand of FAME will increase, and we'll see already the pressure on the FAME today. Since almost 6 months, there is a huge pressure on the producer. We know that because we use FAME to produce our fuel treatments, and now let's say the supply is tight for everyone. That will increase definitely, and we see that in the market in other countries there's more and more and more, if I may say, biorefinery in process.
Thank you. Are there any more questions that we have in the audience? I'd just like to ask you a question. I mean, you said that the quantity that you add is, I mean, it's small quantities for the amount of fuel. Is this something that needs to be added once per voyage or every time you...
Once per bunkering, or once per bunkering.
And do the vessels keep a stock on board, or...?
Yeah, they can stock on board. This is non-hazardous product. Also can be sent by air freight, but we have 40 stocks all around the world.
Okay, excellent. Well, we, in fact, have another question just come up on the screen. You were about to escape there. Could you comment on emissions produced by biofuels as compared to conventional fuels?
Alors, because to go too much deeper in the subject, we are just in test periods. We do a lot of tests with the Center of Research from Canada when they have a specific engine to monitor. But we will see the results. That is a bit too early. Will be maybe for next year.
We look forward to hearing from you in the future about that. Yeah. Well, if you could always please join me in thanking Olivier. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we're going to move on, and we're keeping very, very well to the time schedule. The speakers are being very, very well disciplined about that. We're going to be hearing now from Andrea Cogliolo, who is joining us from the Classification Society RINA, and going to be talking about hydrogen, sustainable fashion, or realistic solution. So looking forward to hearing what he has to say to us. Please join us. Thank you.
So good morning to everybody. And I'm really pleased to be here in presence after more or less 2 years of video conference. It's a pleasure to see someone in front when we are speaking. And thank you very much to the organizers for let us being here to say which are our experience on hydrogen, if it is only a fashion or a realistic solution. Sorry, but I don't know. I am pushing next, but okay. Thank you. Hydrogen is something that when burned is carbon-free. Why I'm saying when burned? Because hydrogen is not available in the nature, and we have to create it, we have to build it. And it's very important in order to reach the target of decarbonization to ensure that what is needed to produce hydrogen is not much more costly in terms of CO2 than burning a normal diesel. So it is really carbon-free, but we have to look to renewable sources in order to have hydrogen. We have to look to atomic power for having hydrogen without having emission of CO2. Hydrogen is a good energy vector. Why we say energy vector? Because, for instance, when we have an excess of production of electrical energy, we can store this energy in hydrogen and then reuse it. Hydrogen can be used in a lot of different solutions. And okay, regarding storability, it can be stored also in large quantity. Probably in the marine industry, the storability is something we have to look a little bit more in detail. Storability is for sure something that is important for what concerns energy. We have a lot of systems to store energy. Energy is to be stored because when it is produced, probably we don't need it, but we need sometimes later. So storability is really important. In an electrical network, it's the customer that is asking for the power. It's not the producer of the power. So there is the need to have a storability of the energy, to have the energy available when it is needed by the consumers. And for sure, for all the system that we can have, from the supercapacitor up to the batteries, the chemicals, methane, hydrogen, ammonia, diesel, fossil fuels, and so on, they are really the real answer for what concerns a storability of a good quantity of energy for a certain time, long time, weeks or months. A price. Price is again another issue. Availability, capability of being environmental friendly, cost, social acceptability, all these things, technical solution available, rules availability, authorization availability, all these are points that can be barriers in the development of new fuels. So from this graph, we see that 2030 could be the period in which the green, the blue hydrogen becomes more, let me say, more economic from the concept point of view than the gray and the blue hydrogen. Gray is the hydrogen taken from, created from LNG or from fossil fuels. Blue is the one created with the carbon capture. And this is something that is promising. Going to the marine, after having said something about hydrogen, going to the marine, I have highlighted this third column of this table because it's quite important to understand that we are now looking to marine gas oil as the fuel that is normally used from the boat up to the big ship. No? It's something fossil that we have used for years. And the quantity of energy in respect of the volume that is used on board is 36 gigajoule per cubic meter. If we are looking to the new fuels, liquid hydrogen, compressed hydrogen, we see that we have a big decrease in the capacity of giving us energy in respect of the volume. It's not important the column of the weight for the shipping, because for the shipping we need volume to have the fuel on board. And this is something that is really a challenge. This is something that is to be studied and investigated. And let me say, this is a number that does not take into consideration any geometrical factor of the tank. So in addition, if we don't use membrane tank, as we have seen in the previous presentation, but we have type C cylindric tanks, in addition, there is a decrease on the volume that is needed, because the volume of the cylindric tank is to be in an hold that contains the cylinder. And this means another space that is lost on board. So this is something that is to be taken really into consideration carefully when we speak about new fuels, because as we can see, all the new fuels have problems in respect of energy, in respect of the density. Okay, now we have seen that also in this conference, we have seen that many different solutions are presently investigated. We are quite sure that not one solution will fit for everything, for every solution, like it is nowadays for the fossil fuel. As I've told you before, nowadays from the yacht up to the biggest container ship, we can use a fossil fuel. For sure, in the future, electrical power of the battery is something that could be a solution for the short sea. It cannot be a solution for a long-distance voyage. In addition, the quantity of fuel that is needed by our industry, by the marine industry, it's really a part, probably a small part of the fuel that is needed by the industry all over the world. And this means that the logistic cost in order to have the distribution of the new fuel cannot be paid only by the marine industry. This means that the decision on which will be the main fuel to decarbonize the world will be decided much more from the onshore industry than from the marine industry. So for a classification society, in our mind, it's very important to be prepared, whichever is the solution, that it will be taken by the marine compartment in order to decarbonize the shipping. And we think that probably all of you knows already that IMO has set targets for 2030 for decarbonization and for 2050. Whichever is the target that we have to reach, it's so challenging as a target that probably the only change of the fuel is not the solution and cannot be the solution. We need to investigate again and still on technological improvement towards a more efficient fleet, finding a new solution and a new technology that will reduce the need of fuel on board. And the same for what concerns the operation. Operation means, in my mind, communication between the ship and the logistic ashore. Excellence in operation means to maintain the ship at the top of its performance, and this can be done with a digital instrument, making monitoring of the performance of the ship, digital instrument that can give you the possibility to speak between agency and ship, so communication, digital things that can make you aware when a maintenance is needed in order to maintain the performance of the ship. So only having this three-step clear in mind and making research on all of these three, we can reach the IMO strategic target or the European Commission proposal targets, which are still much more challenging than the IMO target itself. Now, just to say that it's not only fashion, I have posted here some small examples of what we have done in the past years. We started to speak about hydrogen in 2007, when together with the Italian CNR, we had the opportunity to certify a first, a first example of hydrogen boat, 8 meters of boat, small power on board, but there was hydrogen and there was fuel cell on board. So the boat, it was really an experimental boat, and but this gives us already there the idea of how it's challenging to have to deal with hydrogen. Then we have another project in 2016 with again with the compressed hydrogen and fuel cell. In this case, the challenging is that the authorization, at least in Italy, for passenger ship and cargo ship is not yet available. Here is the nowadays experimental project made by Fincantieri. The ship will be ready, expected the first quarter of 2022. It should be also before, but due to COVID, we had some delay in the construction and in the delivery of fuel cell in particular. And this ship has a power of 120 kilowatt and more or less 4 or 5 hours of navigation on hydrogen. It will be used probably by the governmental authority in order to patrol special marine parks where emissions are not permitted, where sailing is not permitted. How is made? The ship has the concept of being an experimental ship in order to develop technology on fuel cell and lithium battery put together, and to store hydrogen up to 50 kilo. The hydrogen is stored throughout hydrates in solid forms. The goal of this project is to have classification rules for this type of boat, making risk analysis, procedure, and development of the scenario of decarbonization. We have other projects involving hydrogen, ammonia, and methanol, in particular in China with Darr, making focus on tankers and bulk carrier, and with the China Management Group and in cooperation with the China Classification Society, in order to develop hydrogen on inland water and small passenger ship, and also to study ammonia application in the marine sector. Coming back on how to store hydrogen on board, 3 are the methods, mainly methods liquid form, in pressure form, or in solid metal hydrates. Obviously, the solution of the metal hydrates is it's very heavy from the point of view of the weight. Materials and experience that is needed when you have to deal with this new type of hydrogen. For sure, the first need is to have a reference, to have rules and regulation. For a class of society, rules and regulation is like a compass. So you need something to understand what you are going to do. Then there is the problem of materials, especially for electrolyzer and fuel cell, because this kind of material are already used on shore, and we have to marinize this type of material. The development of material understanding with hydrogen is very, very important. Also to increase the capacity for making new design and for making the assessment of the storage systems. RINA has its own laboratory in the south of Italy, just to test hydrogen at very, very high pressure, up to 1,000 bar. And this is made just also to study the behavior of the materials. The behavior of the materials with hydrogen, you know better than me that it's very challenging. And another test that can be done at lower pressure, it's the test absorption of hydrogen when you would like to make this kind of storage. We have also another laboratory, this one in the north of Italy, for studying hydrogen and to test burner. Why this is important? This is very important. It's a cross-fertilization between industry and marine, onshore industry and marine, because here we test a mixture of hydrogen and other things. For example, LNG, for example, natural gas. This is important because LNG could be a transition in the marine field between what we are using now and the future of ammonia or hydrogen. And the mixture could be a pass-through between LNG and full use of hydrogen. Obviously, in making this type of test, you can also do other things like to study which are the quota of CO2 that are associated to this kind of burner and so on. Concluding, let us have the situation in IMO for what concerns hydrogen. Again, compass of the rules for a classification society. IMO is our polar star. The rules are finalized for what concerns the fuel cell. But for what concerns hydrogen and ammonia, we are really at the starting point, at the starting discussion. So it will need some time more. So what is the possibility for a class of society to go on without the rules? We have to apply approval in principle concepts, risk analysis, and finding out solution that can mitigate eventual risk that has been identified. This for the general ship. This one for technology qualification of system already working on the land, working in the industry, but that are to be marinized in order to be used on the ship. And then we have also collected our experience in this year, and we have just published on the 1st of May 2021 our ammonia fueled and ammonia fueled ready rules. 2 days ago, on Friday, we have issued our rules for hydrogen fueled ship and also for hydrogen fueled ready. And I hope that we will be able, just to conclude with methanol, to make the publication of our rules on methanol and methanol-ready ship by the end of this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Very, very interesting, and pleasure to see the progress that's been made just over a short period of time. Things seem to be, we were talking about this last year, but even seems so much more concrete today.
Yes.
We do have a question on Slido, and then I'll put it out to the audience, see if you have any other questions. But is it feasible to produce hydrogen on board? Would it be efficient?
Okay. Yes, the production of hydrogen on board solves one of the biggest problems that we have, that is bunkering. Because bunkering is really a problem. Now, producing hydrogen on board means to have availability of electrical energy and using electrolyzers. So if we have a source of electrical energy, like an electrical energy made on renewable on a dock, and we connect our ship, or better probably our pressure craft, our yacht, to the dock, and we have an electrolyzer on board, there is the possibility, and I have to say that we are studying on that, there is the possibility to produce hydrogen up to a pressure of about 30 bar. That is much more than sufficient to put this hydrogen in tanks where there are hydrates. So with the process of absorption, you can bunker your ship throughout the shore connection. It's a little bit tricky. Probably it's not, let me say, from the point of view of the efficiency is not the top, but if you use renewable, making hydrogen is not something that is, let me say, efficient. You have to, for sure, to use much more energy to produce hydrogen than what hydrogen can give you back. Otherwise, we well invented the wheel. But for sure, if you have renewable sources available, this can be a solution that can be investigated, and this is something that is not fashion, but could be reality.
Excellent, thank you very much. We do actually have another question that's come up on Slido here, and it's an interesting question. I think it's a slight typo, but how can storage production on shore be managed in view of rising environmental and security standards?
Okay, for sure, the production of hydrogen, let me say, it's something that requires a lot of power. So it's better to have this onshore than on board. So I've made the example of the electrolyzer on board, that the power is very low. But probably the real solution is to have big installation on the land that could be from renewable, but also from atomic sources, from new type of reactors, intrinsically safe, that can give the quantity of energy that is needed in order to produce hydrogen, but also other things, for example. So a process of power to X, dove for as per X, you can have what you need.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think it's very informative. Please join me in thanking Andrea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, very interesting topic. Just to remind you, and you have this laid out very, very clearly in the little booklet you have in front of you. So this morning we're still following on with a discussion on future fuels. This afternoon we're going to be looking into alternative propulsion systems. And then tomorrow it's new technologies for better efficiency and compliance and legislation. So carrying on looking at future fuels, we have a presentation from Man Energy Solutions, Michael Jeppesen, and he's going to be giving us a review of fuel options for new building projects. Michael, if you could join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, my name is Michael Jeppesen. I have been working for MAN Energy Solutions for in excess of 30 years out of Copenhagen. And on behalf of the company, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to a presentation here today. And I'm very proud to be here to do this presentation, a review of fuel options for new building projects. And we're talking about two-stroke diesel engines, or whatever fuel is applicable. I have divided my presentation into 4 different chapters and the 5th conclusion. Here is a picture of the headquarters in Copenhagen, where we are designing, developing the two-stroke engines. We are also producing spare parts for the main parts for the combustion chamber. We have the PrimeServe Academy, where we are educating staff for being able to operate our engines. We have the R&D center, a very core facility in Copenhagen, where we are doing a lot of tests of the different engines and the different technologies that we are looking into. And finally, we have Diesel House, which is a historic walkthrough of the shipping business in Denmark for the past 150 years. This is a picture of our new baby. This is a 4-cylinder 50-bore engine that has been produced in Hyundai in Korea. And this is the picture from April last year, when the heavy lifter transported it through the Copenhagen harbor to our research facility where it has now been installed. And this engine is the basics for the development of the new ammonia engine, which will be ready by 2024. Okay. The Man Energy Solutions has expanded the industry portfolio in order to enhance and look into the decarbonization future. We have dual fuel gensets operated or designed in Augsburg and also in Holeby in Denmark. We have different technological development in Augsburg on turbochargers, SCR units, and also EGR blowers. Then we have acquired a major stakeholder for AKA, the Canadian specialist within battery solutions, H-Tech Systems from Germany that are concentrating on hydrogen development. And then we have MAN Cryo in Sweden that we have purchased 100%, and they are specialists within cryogenic storage and LNG and so forth. Then finally in the bottom you see a propeller, and this is our entity in the northern part of Denmark, Alpha Diesel, and they are specialists within hydrodynamic optimization and high efficiency propellers. This is a slide showing the engine program development for our two-stroke engine portfolio, ranging from 30 centimeter bore up to 95 centimeter bore of two-stroke engines, with a minimum or the lowest power is 2,000 kilowatt up to nearly 100,000 kilowatt for the largest engine. And our mission is to meet any combination of propeller power and speed that the naval architects will need for development in the big commercial vessels. This shifter is a little bit... Okay, we are definitely committed to decarbonization. As we have heard earlier today, 80 to 90% of the global freight is actually transported by sea. Shipping is responsible for approximately 3% of the CO2 global emissions today, and if we claim that we are providing 50% of the global freight by our two-stroke or four-stroke engines, then we will actually be responsible for 1.5% of the global emissions. So we are definitely committed, and we have a significant impact on the global maritime sustainability agenda. Okay, here we are. Here we see a picture of the two-stroke dual-fuel engine portfolio that we have been developing over the past decade. It started with the MEGI engine for LNG carriers, and we have today more than 250, actually 271 references, either in service or on order. Then the market was demanding a low-pressure engine for the LNG carriers. And we came up with the MEGA engine, which was launched last year, and we have so far already 52 orders for this low-pressure burning engine. Then we have developed the dual-fuel engines for ethane carriers, methanol carriers, and LPG carriers. And the main issue here is that the engine is actually able to burn the cargo. In 2024, as I have mentioned, we will be ready to launch the ammonia engine. This is a picture of a future scenario. We also believe that it will be a mix of different fuels in the future. Already we have launched the low flash point gaseous fuels, LPG, methanol, LNG, and ethane. Ammonia will be part of it. LNG, hydrogen maybe. I'm not sure for the big scale, but at least biofuel, as we have just heard about before. So how do the fuel properties translate to the criteria of an engine design? We see the fuel properties here on the left, and of course, when we design the engines, we need to be able to burn the fuel safely and efficiently in our engines. Of course, we need to comply with regulation, and that of course ties into the emission of different types. Fuel storage, we have already heard, is a challenge, and the fuel injection system is a challenge because the properties and the calorific value for the fuels is very different. And also when we talk about the fuel supply system, it diversifies with the fuel type we are using. So that is some challenges that we definitely have been going into the past decade when developing these new dual fuel engines. But a positive thing about this is that it has actually made MAN Energy Solutions a fuel injection specialist. So give us a fuel and we will be able to burn it. And this is our challenge now for the ammonia engine. Looking into the emission reductions in comparison with HFO or MGO, traditional diesel fuels, then we look here at LNG, LPG, methanol and ethane, and we include also ammonia. And what we're talking about in regards to emissions today, of course, it is the NOx limitation, the Tier 3 development that came into force in 2016. We have the SOx limitation that came into force in 2020. Particulate matters, it's very obvious that for the low flash point fuels, this is very much reducing in relation to at least HFO. And looking at the CO2 reductions, we have heard before that the best one of these low flash point fuels is LNG with a mere 24% reduction of the CO2 levels. This is when you're operating a high pressure diesel cycle engine. So if we look at these CO2 numbers, it will be difficult solely with the fuels to reach the IMO targets for 2030 and 50. So this is why we need to do it in combination with maybe fuel blending, maybe with other reduction measures. Like for instance, speed reduction of the vessel is a very obvious and very easy way to reduce the CO2. And we have seen that already with vessels. They have been slow steaming for a number of years after the EEDI regulation came in 2013. Here is the table showing the volumetric energy density. This was already touched upon, but if we look at hydrogen, ammonia, the synthetic methanol, DME, and synthetic natural gas, we are seeing that this is definitely creating a challenge on board the vessels, where you need to store much bigger tanks in order to have the same endurance of the vessels. Looking on the right side here, we have the handling, and we have already heard that hydrogen is difficult to handle on board vessels, and it's also not approved by classification societies as we speak. Ammonia is already being transported around the globe as we speak for the fertilizer industry, so that has already also been approved, and it is already being handled on LPG carriers and so forth. The same issue with methanol, LPG and LNG. It is already sailing on the vessels today. But if we're looking at these hydrogen-based fuel options, then the slow RPM of a two-stroke engine allows actually for longer ignition delays, and that makes these fuels, which may not be applicable for other industries, they can be utilized in the maritime industry, which is a very positive thing. That will maybe prevent the prices of going sky high if other industries are interested in this. Power to X, we have heard a little bit of this also, and together with our partner company, H-Tech Systems, we are developing Power to X systems. And just to put it in a very simple way, we are looking into using renewable energy sources like wind farms or solar energy. We have the electrolysis where you add electricity to water and you get the hydrogen and the oxygen. Excuse me. And from the hydrogen, the green e-fuels, synthetic e-fuels can be developed as methane, methanol, different grades of fuel oil, and then synthetic ammonia also. Looking into the pathways of low carbon emission, if we start by the beginning of the EEDI era in 2013, we have seen increasing efficiency, which also goes hand in hand with a decrease of CO2. And with machinery efficiency, we have been able to lower the emissions maybe by 10 to 20% or in relation to ships that were maybe 10 years old. If we add a PTO, it has significant influence on the EEDI, and optimization of hull and so forth. Hydrodynamic efficiency is also giving a decrease in the CO2 level. But as mentioned before, the LNG is the best of the low carbon fuels so far. Speed reduction, another one which is even better, but we won't really be able to avoid, we have already heard that today, the carbon-free base or the hydrogen-based fuels like hydrogen and ammonia. So this will be the serious way of decarbonization. Looking at the two-stroke contracting over the past decade, the black columns here is normal contracting of traditional conventional diesel fuels, and the orange columns are the ordering of dual fuel engines. And as you can see here, in 2021, nearly a third of the orders for two-stroke engines is based on dual fuel ordering. If we look away from LNG carriers, we are down to maybe 1/5 of ordering, but we believe that this number will definitely be increasing. There's been a milestone within ordering of dual fuel engines, and this is the very large container operator, Maersk. They have ordered 8 carbon neutron-free vessels operating on methanol. And methanol is traditionally only implemented on methanol carriers, but now we have had this milestone where A.P. Møller is going to operate these vessels on green methanol. It is still a little bit uncertain where they will get this green methanol. It is being developed, but Maersk, they are saying they have already correlation with 20 different suppliers, and so far it will be solved. They have a few years until the vessels will be coming into service. So why are we seeing this peak in methanol as a marine fuel? First of all, because A.P. Møller ordered it. Then it has created a tremendous focus. It's an advantage for us because we have already more than 100,000 running hours with the LGIM, liquid gas injection, and the M stands for methanol, in methanol carriers. So we have a very good portfolio of engines and service experience already. Then it can be made carbon neutral, green methanol, and methanol is actually very easy to store. It's an alcohol. You can store it ambient temperatures, no pressure, no problems. And the fuel gas supply system is only 13 bar, as opposed to the MEGI engine for LNG, which is 300 bar. Looking into the future, dual fuel contracting forecast, as we can see, the yellow line in the top, this is LNG carriers. All orders today are actually dual fuel orders. Looking at LPG carriers, we are seeing now that approximately 80% are with dual fuel orders, and within a few years we will see 100% ordering of dual fuel engines for LPG carriers also. As I just mentioned before, today we have approximately 1/5 of dual fuel ordering of the remainder of different vessel segments today, and we're looking into a dual fuel ordering by 2030 of approximately maybe 50%. There are multiple future fuel mix scenarios in the pipeline, and a lot of big companies are these years making a lot of studies and so forth. There's some examples here from Bloomberg, from ABS, and from British Petroleum. And I think most interesting is the study to the right, which is made by DNV, where they have set up 30 different scenarios of decarbonization options for looking into day-to-day business where nothing is happening. This is the top, where we will stick to the traditional, conventional fossil fuels, to the very bottom, where we are seeing that the market in the fuel business is taking over with sustainable fuels. So what can be said about these most dominant projected fuels in 2050? I mean, the scale of investment needed to achieve these IMO goals of decarbonization, they are tremendous and will require many resources to innovate and make available these new sustainable fuels. But Darr already talked about this a lot. This is really a scaling up that will take some investment. The most feasible fuels, attractive fuel will be developed in the most efficient way, of course. But the key parameters for evaluation of this will be cost, manufacturability, safety, and supply availability. And looking at the graph here on the right, we're seeing that around 85% of the investment is upstream by producing green hydrogen and ammonia and so forth. One thing is developing the technology for operating on these fuels. Another thing is developing the infrastructure, and this is the biggest challenge. Another big discussion that is taking place is the greenhouse gas emissions, and also the well to wake or well to tank or whatever is pertinent here. The important thing to note here is that IMO's regulation right now is tank to wake. So a ship owner can claim that they have a complete green food stamp when they have a green fuel on board. But what is happening during the production of the fuel, of course, is something else. And here we know that there's some emissions going up in the air here. Same thing about the discussion on methane slip. This is specifically, of course, for LNG. We know that Otto cycle principle is emitting significant more methane than diesel cycle engines. But this is a discussion which is unsolved, and I believe it will be taken up in the IMO MEPC discussion, which is coming very soon. Now finally, the ammonia engine development. We made some pre-studies in 2019 together with a Japanese university, and we have kicked off the project in 2020 last year, and we will be developing the engine concept and also the challenging emissions that we are facing with laughter gas, for instance, created by the ammonia combustion. We will have a full-scale engine in 2023, and then finally an engine should be developed and available for a shipyard delivery by 2024. The next year, 2025, we believe that we will be available with conversions of ammonia, but also conversions of a lot of other of the modern electronic engine. Looking at the mechanical engines and the semi-mechanical engines, the two to the left, the MC and MEB, we will not develop any conversions for these engines, but we will start by the electronic engines, the MEC engine, and then retrofit will be available for all the different low flash point fuels, and now adding ammonia. So to the conclusions, ship owners are facing a number of uncertainties when it comes to selecting fuels for new buildings projects today. We are focusing on fuel flexibility and future-proof investments for the ship owners. And the low flashpoint fuels are already sailing. We have developed that over the past decade, and together with other efficiency methods, we will be able to comply with the 2030 and 2050 combination improvements for decarbonization. A very promising zero-carbon hydrogen-based fuel is ammonia, as I mentioned, and we are ready for launching the first engine in 2024. LNG is an important transitional fuel until the green e-fuels are available. Scale of investment, power to X, and so forth, to achieve these goals are tremendously important and tremendously expensive. But it will be coming, there's no doubt about it. Key parameters for evaluation of the best fuels would be cost, manufacturability, safety, and supply availability. MAN Energy Solutions believe that it will be a mix of different fuels in the future, and we are ready to support them all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Very, very interesting, an awful lot of information there, and must be a very difficult job that you have with the moving goalposts at the moment and the unpredictability of the future. Seems like you've spent a lot of time looking into it. We have time if there's a question or two, very, very, very quickly, and then we're going to move on to the panel because we're running a tiny bit late. Very quickly, this question, and then we'll move on. So, what will be the cost of converting an LNG engine to methane compared to the cost of converting a VLSFO engine to methane? Is there a big difference?
Yes, there will be a big difference, because if you want to convert a traditional diesel engine to LNG or one of the other low flashpoint fuels, you will probably add 20% to the price. But if you have already invested in a conversion, or from the beginning, if the vessel is LNG operated, then if you want to convert that to ammonia, for instance, or any other viable fuel, which will be the future, then you will have to scrap what has ever been done to begin with, and then you have to put something new. So that will be another 20%, because of the difference in the property of the fuel. You cannot use the same tank. You cannot use, GTT can use the same ammonia tank as for the LNG, but the endurance of the vessel will be 1/3 of if you're operating ammonia in relation to LNG. So there is a big difference in the investment cost.
Excellent, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are going to have to move on now because we have the panel discussion and then we have lunch. But on that note, could you please join me in saying a huge thank you to Michael? Very interesting.
Thank you very much. A bit too long.
So now we're moving on to the first of our panel discussions, and this panel discussion is going to be chaired by Charles Haskell from Lloyd's Register. He's going to do a much better job than I could of introducing the various panel guests, and so please will you join me in welcoming them to the stage. They're going to be talking about how to break the chicken and egg dilemma of alternative fuels. Please, if you can come to the stage, we're looking forward to hearing you speak.
Make an omelette. Oop.
Should have sorted that out, yeah.
Well.
Hi, good afternoon now. We're in the afternoon proceedings. I'm very conscious that lunch is on the horizon, so hopefully we'll get through this, but with much debate. Just for the aim of today's panel discussion, we're really looking at the opportunities and the risks which shipping poses with decarbonisation, and what can we learn from other industries as well, and how can we reflect on that, and what has shipping done so far. So today I'm joined by a fantastic panel with diversity across the industry as a mixture across it. So we have Lauren Andrea from Air Liquide, Maddie McLean from Zestas, Zero Emission Ship Technology Association, Michael Arts from Wärtsilä and Nicholas Theodorou from ABC Maritime. The format I'd like to take today is we'll have the discussion for, well, it's a total of 40 minutes. We will be talking for about 25 minutes and we'll take questions at the end. But what I can ask for, if you're using Slido, please ask the questions throughout the panel discussion, and I will try and throw them in during the actual discussion than saving them to the end. So this is not a scripted audience. I've probably thrown everyone under the bus here and didn't tell them that beforehand. But if there's any questions, please just ask throughout the thing on Slido, then we'll come to the verbal questions at the end. So something we've seen today from the various discussions is we know we need to move on into an energy transition. We see the huge commercial pressures there. We see societal interest in decarbonisation across all industries growing more and more. There's no hiding away from it. And I think it was Jim Parry from the Chief Investment Officer at BlackRock recently said the cost of transition will be less the sooner you get your head around the future roadmap and the sooner you begin to transition. However, as also discussed today, there is no catalyst really there at the moment to decarbonize. And so we really are in a chicken and egg scenario. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just start by going one by one with the panel audience, with the panel members, sorry, to give an introduction of themselves, what they're doing at the moment, and then really looking, and for them to sort of answer the question, what are we learning from other industries or amongst their collaboration projects? So ladies first, Maddie, across to you.
Okay. Yeah, Maddie McLean, Zero Emission Ship Technology Association. I have a background in sustainable development, and I've been working in sustainable shipping since the turn of the millennium. But going back a bit further than that, I've got a background in experimental maritime archaeology, and I wanted to mention that. Michel Joyeux and myself have some friends in common à la Trinité. And it was really when I was working in experimental maritime archaeology that I got the ideas that we can use modern racing technology to achieve what humanity's been doing for thousands of years, and that's moving goods around the planet without the use of fossil fuels. I went on to found the International Windships Association, but clear wind is not going to get us all the way to zero, although it is a very big part of that. And I worked for ITM Power, that's an electrolyzer company, representing them to the maritime industry. So that's when I started getting into hydrogen in maritime. But then moved on to, saw that zero emission technology providers there's a lot of technology out there. People aren't aware of this technology. So I pulled together the different zero emission technology providers within the shipping industry into the association, Zero Emission Ship Technology Association. By bringing these technologies together, we not only give them a common voice in the industry, but we also see that how by lining up these different technologies, we can get to zero much faster.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Laurent, over to you next.
Yes, please. So I guess I'm the hydrogen guy here. My background is very simple. I've been working with Air Liquide for 25 years, and I've been doing hydrogen for 25 years. So maybe I can bring you here what the industry can bring to the maritime sector. Well, we can bring hydrogen. At Air Liquide, we sell about 14 billion cubic meter of hydrogen every year. That's 2 billion euro of turnover with large quantities. And I think the maritime sector is very important also with this regard, because in industrial gases and everywhere in the industry, big is beautiful. And the maritime industry can help us to bring those volumes so that we can, it will help us to bring down the cost. With regard to what we are currently addressing, for the hydrogen, of course, we are addressing the mobility market with fuel cell electric vehicles, but more and more we are targeting heavy-duty application, maritime application, and aeronautic application, where hydrogen will make sense. And I'm not saying that it's going to make sense in every segment, because of the characteristics of hydrogen that have been showed this morning.
But for some very specific segment, for sure it will make sense. There's something obvious in the maritime sector, and I'm not a maritime guy, but you've gone from wind to coal, from 100% wind to 100% coal, and then from 100% wind to 100% heavy oil or oil. And I'm sure that the future will not be 100% of something, but it will be a few percent of a few renewable energy vectors, depending on where we are, and that's maybe what we want to discuss now.
Thank you. And Michael, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Charles. It's good to be here and to see a room full of people. My name is Michael Arts. I'm with Wärtsilä, and we are a technology provider for the marine and the energy business. Our company purpose is to enable sustainable societies with smart technologies and services. And myself, I'm working in the marine division in Wärtsilä, and as a general manager market innovation, it's my responsibility to focus on the current and future problems of our clients and work with them to make that better and to improve that. And these days, it is all about decarbonization, and that will be the challenge to solve, let's say, for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Our business is about shaping decarbonization in the maritime and in the energy market.
Fantastic. And last but not least, of course, Nicolas, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm very happy to be here. I will move closer to you now. That's the right time to do it. I hope you're not explosive, Mr. Hydrogen. I'm probably the Mr. Marine guy. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for ABC Maritime, and I'm very happy to be the voice of the ship-owning community, if you like. I started my career with Shell Petroleum, so I know a little bit about fuels. I have a good ex-colleague here together. Then I moved to clean and renewable energy. We did clean and renewable energy in Southeast Asia. And as the Chief Strategy Officer of ABC Maritime, we're really sort of like worried and skeptical and monitoring the industry on what to do. First of all, what to do now, and then what to do in the short, medium, and long term basis. That our vision is to be the #1 service provider for our customers. We own vessels, we manage vessels, we offer technical management, operations management, commercial management, and crewing management. And I would like to sort of like frame the conversation a little bit here and request that we all dedicate some time to speak about the crews that operate our vessels as well, the human beings that are on top of our vessels, and not just focus on technology and innovation, which is absolutely fantastic, of course, and this is why we're here. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, and I'll certainly note that down as one for later. In terms of and discussions we've had today, and the discussions in the media as well, as we see many other industries all having similar conversations. We talked about Airbus earlier. I suppose one question, particularly for Michael and Laurent, you're working across industries, is how do you see the appetite in the shipping industry to decarbonize compared to other industries your sector's working in? If I hand it over to you first, Michael.
Yes, well, obviously we have the view from the energy market as well, and I think the key thing there is that you have to work with what's locally available and what is the local appetite. So our energy solutions business is very much focusing on decentralized energy production in remote areas, for example, and what are the specific requirements that are working there. In shipping, we are dealing with a global industry. IMO is setting the global rules. We have the EU doing that in the European Union. But it's very much an international business, and that's a big distinction between these two industries. I think that in the energy business, you have better control of local regulations, because that's what is driving this. And in the maritime market, it is very much a global business, and that's a bigger challenge in my view.
Okay, and Laurent, over to yourself.
Yes, here I'm the techno guy, but I need to have a market approach. First, not doing techno push, not going to. We see a lot of projects where People want to have hydrogen, people want to have ammonia, and I don't think it's the correct approach. I think the correct approach is to ask yourself about your functional specification, about your functional requirements, and then we'll draft together the optimum solution. And it will be a local solution according to the local energy sources or the local available energy vectors that you have available.
And just coming back to when we're talking, Michael, when you were talking about the IMO and you got other industries have local legislation. Coming over to you, Nicolas, from a ship owner's perspective, how confusing is this for you in a market where you've got the EU, you've got the IMO, you've got local legislation? Where would the clarity come to for you as a ship owner?
Well, a bit of history before I answer the question. Just a tiny bit of history. I think shipping, first of all, we've seen today, shipping accounts for what? About 3% of GHG emissions, right? And we're talking about decarbonizing the 3%, first of all. Now, traditionally, I think, and I'm going back to 50, 60 years, we could have been burning, cleaner fuels to begin with. The industry as a whole was required, if you like, due to the refining process, to start burning fuel oil and diesel oil. Somebody needed to burn that. So to put everything together, we're talking about a 3% GHG emission polluter that transports 90 to 95% of either bulk, wet, or containerized goods. We currently have, correct me if I'm wrong, something like anything between 55 and 65,000 vessels on the water, let's say 60,000, depending on the vessel type. They already have their engines, they already burn fuel, they already transport 95% of everything, and we are extremely confused as to how we can continue doing this, at least for the next 5 years, let's say. Because I saw from the graphs from all the technical colleagues that we're talking about, things that need to be done 10 years from today or 15 years from today, we can plan, we can support. I think we're more than happy to do so, right? We wish to evolve as well. The big question here is, are we respecting the element of time, if you know what I mean? Because sometimes we feel that there's a lot of innovation going on and somebody has a magic wand that will say, boom, change tomorrow. And this is basically what we're asking ourselves. Is this possible? We already did EU MRV, which was a fantastic move by the European Union. It created the necessary pressure to the IMO so that the IMO comes up with the IMO DCS. We now have EEXI. We're now moving to all these new regulations. But we do not have dual fuel engines yet installed on our vessels. We installed the scrubbers, we paid for them. We installed our water ballast treatment systems, we paid for them. And we are basically wondering what else we need to budget for.
Okay, thank you.
And when.
And therefore, in terms of acceleration and moving things forwards, Maddie, I know you're involved in quite a few projects at the moment which are moving forward. How much of that is local legislation or coming in from investors? How are those projects starting, and what is spearheading them on? How are they getting the momentum, and are they scalable?
Thank you for passing the word, Charles. First, I want to respond, and I think that quite often when we talk about shipping, we're talking about it as if it's a homogeneous sector, as if it's all one thing.
Thank you.
And there's a lot of sectors within shipping that will find it very, very challenging to transition. And as Charles mentioned, I'm working on projects that are the low-hanging fruit, the cutting edge, the easy places where we can start moving and developing that technology that can then trickle through the rest of the industry as stronger policies and regulations come in to make that economically viable. Because without that, given the margins of shipping, it ain't going to happen. It's as simple as that. And so to answer your question, I think, is it regulation? Is it government funding? Is it investment? Well, it's a mix. It's very much a mix of the three.
but it is led, I would say, primarily by government and by policy, and then the R&D that then follows that policy. As I'm working on several projects in the UK, where we're looking at decarbonizing the offshore wind fleets, for example. So this is what I'm talking about, the low-hanging fruit. You have a captive fleet with offshore wind. You have O&M vessels, SOVs, going back and forth within the wind parks. You also have the public opinion that if we're going to be doing renewable energy, we should be doing it clean. So you've got that pressure on that side, but most importantly, you actually have the energy in the field. We've done some studies around where is the fuel used most. Well, it's kind of a no-brainer, but obviously it's going back and forth to port to refuel. So a simple way of reducing the overall energy requirement of the vessels is for those vessels to refuel in the fleet, or rather in the field. And we're now seeing some new technologies coming forward, some pilots where we're experimenting with electrolyzers actually in the offshore wind unit. So we're producing hydrogen in the field. So it's a place where tomorrow, 3 years' time, it may not have a huge impact on reducing carbon emissions across shipping as a whole, but it gives us an opportunity to, within an economic framework, develop and bring forward these technologies. At the moment, we've got fuel cell vessels on the water, under 500 kilowatts. Let me put it that way, under 500 kilowatts. Obviously, when you're talking ocean-going vessels, we need upwards of 20 megawatts. For large bulk carrier, and even more than that considerably more than that for cargo vessels. So how are we going to get there? The way we're going to get there is by testing this technology at pilot stages in an economically viable environment, which we have in this offshore wind scenario, and then scaling up rapidly when regulation comes in. Because to be honest, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Chicken and egg, crack it, regulations. But anyway.
But and I think there's some discussions tomorrow as well on the policies and the regulations. But actually, I wanted to come back to what Nicholas mentioned at the beginning, is actually talking about the seafarers, the competencies as well, because we know when the discussions today, we've all shown that we're moving to fuels, and actually these fuels are less safe than the fuels of tomorrow. The fuels of tomorrow are less safe than the fuels of today, and that's quite recognised. So if we talked about competency, and the last thing we wanted is for a transition to be ended early because of a safety issue, and therefore overcoming those safety issues is paramount. But rather than jumping straight to the seafarer, actually, I just wanted to come across, because it's just across the whole board, safety, and in terms of competence as well. So in terms for, say, Air Liquide, Laurent, have you managed to find the competency in the market for hydrogen? Is that something readily available with the knowledge there? Is it being absorbed by other industries? And is there going to be a fight for the best within the future?
Yes, for sure. There's a small story I like to tell is when we had the visit of Benoît Potier, our CEO. His first question was, what do you need to go faster? And my answer was, you know what, we don't need more money, because we would not be able to spend it, because we don't have enough people, we don't have enough competencies. So you're right, the competencies are the core of our issues. And to come back to the chicken and egg, what we have is we have a history of more than 60 years of development of hydrogen, either liquid or high pressure or on-site production. So we developed our own competencies, and I personally attended an internal seminar in our company 2 weeks ago. And in the room, very quickly, we had almost 600 years of expertise in hydrogen altogether, met in a single room. So we have the expertise, we have people who are very knowledgeable, but maybe we are not enough. We'll never be enough. Or maybe you've got some very, very old people in your company, you've just got a small handful.
I don't be old, you know what? No, yeah.
But sort of joking aside, moving over, Nicolas, from your side of competency, I mean, what are the main concerns there in training?
I suspect, right? We will need a transition period where I suppose every single seafarer gets retrained on these new technologies. I mean, is there any other way, I'm guessing? This will probably include certification. We have representatives from the classification societies. We will need to have new regulation that applies to every seafarer that they will need to do, whether it's wet, dry, or container cargo. I'd like to echo, Maddie, here that with regards to shipping, we talk about shipping like it's one thing, but it's not one thing. It's many things together. Wet cargoes are very different. The dry cargoes are very different than the container market, are very different than the offshore market, are very different than the wind market, are very different than the coastal shipping market, are very different than the cruise ferry market. So, why don't we sort of like treat each segment with its own merits? Because if you take international and ocean-going shipping, we're talking about tramp shipping. And tramp shipping is not all about time charter. You have your spot market. And when you have your spot market, you need the fuel there and then, and you need to go from A to B, and the way you're going to profit from this activity is to find the best way to do that and the cheapest way to do that. And we also witnessed with low sulfur fuels that the availability of LSFO wasn't always there when needed. So sometimes I ask myself the question, are we trying to create a time charter shipping business? Because in order to be able to plan, and I've done quite a bit of planning in my life. Shell Petroleum is in love with planning and forecasting, as you understand. But in order to plan and to forecast, you need to have definite things happening. Okay. And in tramp shipping and spot charter shipping, there are no definite things. I mean, you learn today what you're going to do tomorrow, if not some hours later.
If I can hand over to Michael from that, because I know also, Vatsila, you're working across all the segments. You're probably a very good industry place to follow on.
Yeah, true. We are serving basically all sectors in the maritime market, and I fully support the view that there is no one shipping. It's many different industries, and just would like to touch on the point of people working with technology. A couple of months ago, we are the first maritime engine technology provider that has started an engine on ammonia as a fuel. So we are taking these steps forward. We have already hydrogen blending capability with our engines. We have a methanol engine in a ship in operation since 2015. So on the fuel technology side, we are taking the steps forward. It is basically the infrastructure which is the hurdle that we need to pass. And I also share the view that tramp shipping will not be the leader in this transition. You need a long-term charter or a long-term connection in order to make a step to a different fuel. We have seen, for example, that it's not charter related, but how the cruise and passenger vessels were the first ones to uptake LNG besides the LNG carriers itself. So there was a long-term commitment in order to do that. There was sufficient scale being brought by several companies to make the fuel available, to start building bunkering vessels. And now this is starting to accelerate, because now the pressure on decarbonization is getting so huge that now, let's say, the main shipping industry is following that. But it is still the major shipping companies that are taking these steps, the ones that have a long-term outlook, that have long-term charter commitments. I think from the tramp shipping point of view, they will follow that, but what every shipping segment here needs is still flexibility to adapt. So fuel flexibility, and especially in tramp shipping, if you don't know what your next port of call is going to be, you still need to rely on the conventional fuels, and this is what we do with Wärtsilä dual fuel engines. So the always having the capability to burn the HFO or MGO, LNG, and now also with ammonia to start with that.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to move on to the Slido question which has come in. If governments will drive change through policy, how will they be able to police the policies? And I think probably best place, Maddie first, followed by Nicholas.
I was afraid of that. This is the
Go, Maddie.
The ultimate. Go Maddie on this one. This is kind of the ultimate challenge, isn't it? And I think that this is the $1 million question that's trying to be answered within the IMO. And I mean, I wish I could give a clear answer on that. But I think by looking at what's going on in the IMO right now, the discussions in the IMO, it's very clear that this is, this isn't. We don't have the answer to this, and I'm not going to pretend that we do. And if you've got a better answer than I do, please.
Well, the Swiss Shipowners Association Secretary General, Mr. Olivier Baiwir, he was just here. I think he popped out. Perhaps an answer to this is the fuel tax that the international shipping community is more than willing to participate in. Not market-based measures, not sort of like a carbon credit gamble and trading similar to the proposed EU ETS system that we've seen has not performed particularly well, especially if we take into account industry and, so I'm talking about onshore industry and the airlines. At this particular point, I guess we need trust. So we cannot say that we don't trust the IMO. The IMO is our governing body. It is part of the United Nations. If there's going to be a tax levy on fuels, if it is collected by the IMO in a transparent way, that's the only thing the only thing we require is that it's a flat rate, applicable to all, collected in a transparent way, and invested in a transparent way. I suspect a large chunk of it will go into R&D. It will subsidize and help all the required innovation that we want to do. It may even go to subsidize the supply chain so that we can actually get the fuels that we require. It'd be lovely if some of it also went to the ship owners and, somebody said, if you want to retrofit your main engine into a dual fuel engine, if you do it quickly, we'll give you a 30% discount. That'd be very much appreciated.
Go on, Maddie. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm actually going to come back in on this because I think that we don't have the solutions to hand today to deal with this. But I think that the solution to this is just around the corner, and we need to know what ships are emitting, and we need to know what they're emitting on a daily basis. And I think that soon we will have the data connectivity, where we won't be reliant on the noon reports. We won't be reliant on some handwritten document, or even on what did they say the most falsified document in the legal document is the bunker reports.
I don't see that coming really soon. The EU MRV relies on noon reports.
Yes, at the moment, it's on noon reports, and that's why I say I don't see this coming tomorrow. But we will soon have data connectivity, which will play into overall system efficiencies on ships. And as we're monitoring system efficiencies, we will be monitoring exact burn of what, if you will. And that's the point where we will be able to police this, because all of the things that we're seeing in the IMO, and I'm not even going to go into the alphabet soup of IMO about the different policies and how they interact with each other, and at what point we actually consider how much any particular ship has emitted, or how much a fleet has emitted. There's always something in the mechanism where you go, well, actually, that's not going to work because of this or because of that. So if we have, and I think this is something we should be looking at in the long term, instead of thinking about what are we going to do next year or what are we going to do in 3 years' time, is to work really concretely on something that's going to be very efficient in maybe 5 or 7 years' time. Sorry?
The question then remains the same. Who's going to pay for it? There are almost 100 software, as far as I know, at least, in shipping. Performance software, fuel emission software, carbon emission software, classification societies have their own software. Who's going to pay for the software because, you know, it's a fantastic thing. Yes, let's go into a world where we're all connected and we can see in real time how much everyone consumes per grade, per engine, per auxiliary, at berth, at port, at sea, la la la.
Yeah.
Who's going to pay for that? The ship owner again.
And the costs, well, we will see where the costs then get transported. We've seen container rates go high. The costs get transported elsewhere.
I think on behalf of the ship owning community, we would love to have a solution where we actually don't really need to pay for it 100%, especially when you don't necessarily get the marginal benefit. I mean, it'd be fantastic if traders and charterers said, you know, we'll give you an extra 20% because you have a clean vessel, because you have installed that system. I mean, we don't see that happening. Contrary to that, over the past like 2-3 years, most of the shipping segments were operating below OPEX. So the ship owners were actually subsidizing the operation of the vessel, unfortunately. Okay, I'm sure that everyone in the container market is super ecstatic as we speak, and rightly so. They went through a tough time. Last year, it was the tanker market. Again, because we belong in the tanker market, we went through a tough time, but these good times basically pay off the tough times that we went through. And when you go through 2, 3, or 3 years below OPEX,
just conscious
of... You're basically subsidizing your operation.
Quick interjection, and that's that. This is one of the things that we're looking at in the different MBMs, is building in a mechanism where that money goes back to level the playing field within the industry.
We would never agree with a market-based measure.
Okay.
Absolutely not. It's especially if it remains as unregulated and off the counter as it currently is. I've worked with market-based measures for many, many years. We did UNFCCC joint projects in Southeast Asia. Part of the income of these projects were carbon credits. Carbon credits, when I started doing my financial models, carbon credit was at $29 per CER. When I finished doing my financial models, it was $2 per CER. The gamble and the trade-off between buying and selling and forward selling, and what will this mean for a shipping company? Will we need to invent a new department within the company called the trading department?
Just conscious of time as well, coming up to lunch.
We have a flat, transparent tax, and everybody will be happy.
Are there any further questions from the audiences? Yep, I see 2 over here.
Maybe the microphone is not working, I'm guessing.
Charles.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Wojtek Czorkowski from Sea Blue Ocean. Not really a question, but perhaps a reflection. And not long ago, Nicholas and I, we were part of a Mare Forum, so I'm afraid I will come from a similar angle. But what strikes me in a discussion today, and somehow I was also, it struck me also in the morning that there is obviously a very viable dialogue about efficiency, about the incremental progress, but somehow what I'm missing in the discussion is the very fact, you know, the reason that this conference came about in the first place is that we have a major climate crisis in our hands. And I don't think that we have enough time for linear progress. I think the industry as a whole will sooner or later need to experience something of a disruptive nature to really get on with reality. And I think, you know, listening to Nicholas and listening to many voices from the shipping industry, and I spent 2 decades in shipping, and I think have a good insight into the culture dynamics that drive the industry. I think that those dynamics are counterproductive to the industry itself, because the industry, rather than get on board, to a large extent remains in self-denial. And what's the result of that? In politics, they say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. The practical implication of that is that many of the policies are done in Brussels, and perhaps because shipping industry was not a part of that. And the last thought, which is a similar thought that I had at Mara, that we're talking about a challenge, we're talking about a carbon tax, but we're not really talking that, what's happening is probably once in a generation or longer an opportunity. So perhaps we should start thinking about a carbon dividend for the shipping industry rather than a carbon tax. And if we perhaps direct our mental attention and think about what is it that we need to get done by 2030, 2050, looking at the goals we must accomplish, and then build future-back strategy, I think we'll be better able to come up with a viable roadmap, probably more quickly.
May I just comment on that?
There you go.
First of all, thank you very much for your comments, especially for the dividend part. I just want to say here and sort of like reiterate that, again, we are the 3%. I don't see the shipping, the maritime, I will include the whole maritime community and especially the shipping community being in denial. Over the past decade, we've had to comply and retrofit our vessels in many different ways and invest and reinvest in assets that were already there. And we did that at the time we were requested to do it, in the manner we were requested to do it. And we kept supplying the world with goods even throughout COVID. And our crews were on our vessels for 8, 9, 12, 16 months. We're not in denial at all. It's just that the only thing we request, and maybe this is part of our panel as well, if you like, is some clarity on what we need to do and by when, instead of ad hoc, regulations and ideas. We also need to plan. We need to operate our current vessels, the one that we already own, and we'd like to put some vessels in the order book as well.
Okay, if we can hand over to Michael as well.
Yeah, I also just want to comment on the comment or question that was brought up, and I do see that the indicators are now more and more all pointing in the same direction. I mean, a couple of years ago, the Poseidon Principles was founded. A year later, the Sea Cargo Charter was founded. Outside formal regulation, this is ship financing coming together, setting targets for decarbonization and the ships that they finance. And if you speak about ship financing, then that's a strong incentive. The same goes for Sea Cargo Charter. I'm sure there are Sea Cargo Charter signatories here in this room. Shell certainly is. So that is driving change. And obviously, the big banks, it's Citibank, ABN AMRO, ING, and other banks, this list is still growing. That's a very strong push towards decarbonization. It has been roughly 20 years ago that Al Gore went around the world with this video, An Inconvenient Truth, and not a lot has happened actually with the last couple of years. Since ship financing is starting to commit, things start to shift. You see that the EU taxonomy is currently under preparation. What is green and what is not? You heard the British Prime Minister say it's easy to be green at the United Nations, but the point here is that when the EU is stating this is not green and the money moves away from that sector, that's a very strong incentive to drive change, in my view.
And just last question, one last question, Michael.
Yeah, Mikhail Beu from Core Power. The one thing that we can't change and the laws that we can't break are the laws of nature. Laurent, you mentioned that your company, which is one of the premier producers of hydrogen in the world, makes 14 billion cubic meters a year, is that right?
14, yes.
14 billion cubic meters. liquid hydrogen at 1 Kelvin is 71 kilos, so that's approximately 1 million tons of hydrogen, I assume. If we turn that into ammonia using a Haber-Bosch process, we get 5.2 times as much ammonia. So that's equivalent, that's the annual production of one of the premier hydrogen companies, produces 5 million tons of ammonia. If we are going to take 350 million tons of bunker fuel and replace it with ammonia, we'll need roughly 1 billion tons of ammonia, which would be 200 million tons of hydrogen, which, according to my simple calculator on my iPhone, is 2.8 trillion cubic meters of hydrogen. My question to the panel is, how realistic is this, and when can it be done?
So if I hand over to
That's Laurent.
Lauren and Michael.
Yes, this was my point. First, we are not going to change everything by one single new magic fuel, which would be hydrogen. Then it's going to be by step. And then it's also everybody's responsibility to invest. The original subject of the panel discussion was the chicken and the egg. For sure, if you have vehicles without infrastructure, if you have ships without infrastructure, you won't be able to sail. But at least if we invest in infrastructure, then we'll bring the ship. And our responsibility at Air Liquide is to invest in infrastructure. Our commitment by 2030, which is in our world almost tomorrow, because when we invest in plants, it's for 20 years. Our commitment is to invest in 8 billion euro in hydrogen, in investment in hydrogen, and 3 gigawatts of electrolysis. Of course, it's not going to solve all problems, but it's part of it. And what the maritime sector can bring to us is volumes. Because in the chemical industry, in the industrial gas industry, big is beautiful. If we multiply by 10 the size of a plant, we will divide by 2 the TCO. So the interest here is that a ship is a large consumer, and it will also help us to lower our cost, then hence to make it feasible and possible.
Do you want to add?
Yeah, I think that my response to this is that perfect is the enemy of good. So we can wait for a perfect solution. That will take a very long time, and in the meantime, we need to decarbonize and nothing is happening. So I think we also need to work with what we have today, that is LNG, which is available at scale. The infrastructure is now rapidly increasing. It is not available everywhere, but at the main shipping routes, it is increasing. So we cannot ignore to not work with that. We need to work with that. And next to that, we need to invest in hydrogen, ammonia, methanol. I mean, whatever works for a certain area or a certain shipping segment. But I think waiting for a perfect solution is something we cannot afford as a shipping industry.
And I think that rolls in sort of just to finish it off, and final comments of being made today is this is also not just about everything all at one go. It's an energy transition. Exactly. And if you look at the getting to zero curves and other sort of energy transitions in the path, it's really following an S curve. And as Maddie said as well, you need those innovators, you need those first movers. The tramp shipping, there's segments which will be later, and they do need to be considered to be later, and not all jump into the puddle at the same time. In terms of competency as well, it is a time actually to start investing in people. As we heard from Laurent, it's needing to invest in people and actually train people up, even down at university and school level across the whole board, whether they're going to be engineers on the ship or on board, in the factories and the shipyards and the repair yards. The other side is digitalization, transparency, whether it be policy or energy efficiency, and really driving that energy efficiency. It's still a very old industry when it comes to digitalization, and step changes are really required there to get the true efficiencies on, which would probably then allow policies to be adopted with a lot more transparency and a lot more effectiveness. And I think that probably last of all, I was speaking to my daughter the other day, and I was just trying to write down what I needed to put down for today, and she said, well, what about chicken and egg? And she mentioned it, and she said, well, why don't you just break the egg? I thought, well, I hadn't thought of that. Is the model in shipping today the correct model to follow through an energy transition? I think that was covered today as well, actually, quite rightly.
That's a fantastic question. That's a fantastic question.
So it's a case of, yeah, do we use the egg for another purpose, and how do we go forward with that?
So thank you very much for listening, and enjoy your lunch, and I'll hand over.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well moderated.
So thank you very much, Charles, for that. Thank you also to all the panelists. Very great discussion. And so that means we are going to stop for the lunch break now. We have a very interesting discussion in the afternoon. We're going to be talking about alternative propulsion systems, and we're going to get back at 2:35. And also keep in mind that tomorrow we actually have some discussions on some of the topics that were covered here today. And so in fact we'll have SGS who are talking tomorrow afternoon about the crew situation on board, and then Chris from Lloyd's Register will be giving us a presentation talking about regulations, and then also chairing a panel discussion with the ICS and also UNCTAD talking about that very subject. So should be a very interesting afternoon. See you back here at 2:35 after lunch. Have a good lunch. Thank you.